Chapter 275. Originally, they had developed a kind of liquid that smelled good to humans. Once zombies smelled it, they would feel nauseous and leave voluntarily. They had come all the way from the south, and this liquid had saved their lives several times. However, this kind of liquid had no effect on the tide of zombies this time. Every zombie was staring at them fiercely, with no intention of leaving at all. Facing this situation, the researchers were completely panicked. There had been a rescue mission before. 200 to 300 people had come from several bases. These researchers and the remaining guards had wanted to take the opportunity to break out of the encirclement, but in the end, they did not make it out. Many of them had died, and more than half of the rescue team had died. What was more frightening was that they had found some very special zombies. These zombies had mixed in the tide of zombies. Judging from their appearance, they looked very much like humans. Only a part of them still retained the characteristics of zombies. Except for the fact that they couldn't speak, they looked no different from humans in terms of appearance. This made the rescue team even more panicked. Had zombies evolved to such a level? That was why those bases didn't dare to send a second wave of people to rescue them immediately. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a rescue mission, but a suicide mission. According to their preliminary guess, those zombies that looked like humans were likely to be at least level 4 zombies. There might even be level 5 zombies. When Xiaoqing arrived with her people, she saw many people wandering around nearby. They should be the scouts from each base, who had come to observe the situation. When she arrived, Xiaoqing hadn't expected that there would be so many zombies here. Just looking at the sea of corpses and moving heads, it was already very scary. The rotten smell of the zombies gathered together could be carried for 3 miles with the wind. Even if they were far away, it was still nauseating. Not far from the reservoir, there was an observation point set up by the bases. Xiaoqing led her people there. Before she arrived, Xiaoqing said, "Since we've come all the way here, it's time to part ways. I wish you a safe trip and return to the capital soon." Qin Zishi was very calm. "Who said I'm leaving? If I'm leaving, I'll take those researchers with me." He must have thought about this for a long time, or he wouldn't have said it so calmly. As soon as Qin Zishi spoke, the girl with no space beside him immediately said, "Young master, it's too dangerous here. You'd better go home." Xiaoqing also said, "She's right. You should go home first. You can't change the current situation on your own. If you stay here for too long, your family will definitely be worried." Qin Zishi's expression was very serious. Her chubby little face was scrunched up into a ball. "I decided to stay after careful consideration. You don't have to persuade me, especially you, Sister Qing. You're already staying, so why do you have to ask me to leave?" There were 2 reasons why he didn't leave. First, his friends were all going into danger, and he couldn't go home alone to enjoy the peace and security. Secondly, he was also a citizen of the Celestial Empire. In the past, when he was weak, he could not do anything. Now that he was a level 3 paranormal and encountered such a situation, he naturally had to do something for the country. Of course, the first reason was more important. Xiaoqing patted his head and said, "I don't want to nag you, but the current situation is really not suitable for you to be involved. Go home quickly. If there's a chance, I'll take the little bun to see you." Qin Zishi widened his eyes and said angrily, "I'm already 17 this year. In a few months, I'll be 18. I'm not a child anymore. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry, Sister Qing, I won't be a burden to you." Chapter 276. Xiaoqing didn't want him to stay at all. This kid always claimed that he was almost 18 years old, but in fact, he was only 16 years old. His nominal age was 17, and he hadn't experienced much. It was too dangerous for him to get involved. Qin Zishi had a stubborn temper and refused to leave no matter what. Hence, they were in a deadlock, and Xiao Qing had no choice but to take him to the observation point to settle him down. The staff stationed in S City base in the observation point was having a headache. When he saw Xiao Qing and others come in, he quickly asked, "Has the rescue team sent by the base arrived?" Xiao Qing shook her head. "The base is still recruiting people. They shouldn't be here for a while. We came here spontaneously. What's the situation now?" The man's eyes darkened and he was a little disappointed, but he still forced himself to be spirited and said, "I've contacted the people inside. They can still hold on for a few days, but there's not much food left." After all, when they came out, they didn't bring much food, only enough to reach the capital. When they were besieged before, they lost part of it. Now there's less than a day's worth of food left. We're trying to find a way to transport the food in. With food, they should be able to hold on for 2 more days. As long as they can hold on for a few more days, they may be able to hold on until the base's rescue. But our food can't be sent in. Those zombies prevent anyone who tries to get close. We once tried to let people with space powers sneak in with food. As a result, a high-level mutant zombie jumped out. Even the space power man couldn't come out alive. Another staff member added with a wry smile. Xiao Qing frowned and asked in a low voice, "So now, is there any food?" "Yes." The staff member lifted the tarpaulin. There were all kinds of dry food under it. Although the dry food was not delicious, it could fill the stomach and save the lives of the people inside. "Let me try." Xiao Qing thought for a long time and then said. Her physique was different. Although at the beginning, she had felt endless distress because of this physique, later, she felt more and more that her zombie-like physique had great benefits. For example, now she wouldn't be attacked by zombies, so she could bring in all the food. The staff member was stunned and hesitated. After all, he didn't know Xiao Qing's identity. What if she ran away with the food? This was the first reason. The second reason was that if Xiao Qing was not strong enough and died in the zombie crowd, wouldn't they lose a lot of food? He didn't want Xiao Qing to die in vain. Xiao Qing just showed the badge of a paranormal in the S-City survivor base and said, "I have a special ability that can make the zombies not attack me for a short time. Let me have a try. I can't just watch them starve to death." The staff discussed and agreed. Looking at the situation, it would take a long time for the rescue team to arrive. By the time the rescue team arrived, the people inside would starve to death before they were eaten by the zombies. They didn't have any other way to bring the food in. It was better to trust Xiao Qing this time. The only problem now was how to bring the food in without exposing her space. Qin Zishi was very considerate. He patted his chest and said, "Sister Qing, I'm a space paranormal. I'll lend you my space paranormal. I wish you success." Xiao Qing was very happy about his trust. She looked at the thin girl and said, "Don't worry. I'll bring her back safely." After the discussion, it was decided that Xiao Qing, Dai, and the space paranormal named Lon would go in together. The more people there were, the more cumbersome it would be. Chapter 277. As for Dai, as a zombie, he would not be attacked and could even help them. After confirming the people going in, Lon put all the food into her space and was carried by Xiao Qing. After all, she was only a little stronger than ordinary people, but she did not have any other ability to protect herself. Once she entered the zombie crowd and was separated from Xiao Qing, she would die. Therefore, Xiao Qing directly carried Lon on his back. She was going to let Dai carry her, but Dai, who was always obedient, suddenly lost his temper and refused to touch Lon, making the scene very awkward. Xiaoqing had no choice but to carry Alan on his back. Due to the lack of time, Xiaoqing only told a few men to take good care of Little Bun and the others, and then resolutely entered the zombie crowd. When approaching the zombie crowd, Lan was a little scared and her body tightened. Soon, she found a very strange thing. All the zombies acted as if they did not see them. Occasionally, one or two zombies would turn around and stare at her, and when they approached, Dai would glare at them and run away. Lan was stunned. Since the end of the world, she had never seen such a scene. People were afraid of zombies, but zombies were not afraid of people. The deeper they went, the more zombies there were. Many zombies smelled the scent of living people and turned their heads towards Lan. Dai immediately bared his big white teeth and stared at those zombies fiercely. Dai was close to the high level of level 3. Although there were many level 3 zombies in this zombie crowd, Dai was born with a fierce aura. Ordinary zombies would avoid him when they saw him. Moreover, Xiaoqing was at level 5, so no zombies would dare to come over. However, the deeper they went, the more Xiaoqing found that something was wrong. Although most of the zombies in the zombie crowd were at level 3, and some were at level 2. There were no level 1 zombies at all, but this zombie crowd should not have almost wiped out the rescue teams of the major bases. Then there was only one explanation. There were higher level zombies hiding in the zombie crowd. Xiaoqing observed carefully and soon saw a little girl standing in the zombie crowd not far away. The little girl looked to be about 8 or 9 years old. She had a head of long black hair that was draped over her shoulders. She was wearing a pink princess dress that was a little dirty. She was also holding a teddy bear in her arms. The bear should have been brown, but because it was stained with too much dust and blood, it had turned dark black. At a glance, it looked more like an ordinary little girl who had been separated from her family. However, when the little girl raised her face, Xiaoqing realized that her face was very delicate and pretty. It was round and chubby with a tinge of pink. However, there were only holes left in her eyes. In the black holes, 2 glass-like eyes were burning with a layer of flames. Only this could let others know that she was not a living person. The little girl seemed to have felt Xiaoqing's gaze. She grinned and showed her jagged teeth. She was very fierce, and her strength was very high. Xiaoqing could not help but take a deep breath. Was this the mastermind of this zombie crowd? If so, this zombie crowd would be very dangerous. Zombies at this level should have high intelligence, and they led so many zombies. It was definitely not easy to deal with them. Just when Xiaoqing was deep in thought, the zombie had disappeared. She frowned and continued to move forward. Soon, she saw a second zombie that was different from the others. That zombie was an adult man. He was dressed like a white-collar worker and wore a pair of glasses. He looked more like a living person than the little girl zombie. Chapter 278. However, its collar was open, and there should have been a heart in its chest. Now, there was only a rotten black hole. Through the black hole, one could see its empty body. There was not a single piece of internal organs inside, but there was an infant zombie, looking outside with its head. The baby zombie was wrinkled and looked like it had just been born, but the surface of its body was bluish-black. It was also smiling at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing felt cold all over. These 2 zombies, their strength was not lower than the little girl zombie. If she fought the little girl zombie alone, she could still win, but with these 2 zombies, she was afraid that she would be the one to die. Xiaoqing could only bite the bullet and walk in. Fortunately, until she approached the reservoir, she did not see any other high-level mutant zombies. When she arrived at the reservoir, Xiaoqing was worried. How should she get in? The outermost layer of barbed wire was covered with vines, and there were small flowers on the vines, which looked very green and beautiful. With Xiao Qing's eyes, she could see that the vines were not only poisonous, but also highly poisonous. And if she rashly climbed over the wall, she would be regarded as an invading zombie, right? Xiao Qing thought about it and decided to climb over the wall, but the way she climbed over the wall was special. The vines grew from the ground and formed an upward vine pillar, sending Xiao Qing and the other two into the air, and then she jumped in. In the next second, the patrolman shouted, "Enemy attack! There are zombies climbing over the wall." Then a group of people came out of the second layer of the wall. All of them were highly alert and ready to use their powers. "Xiao Qing," she slowly raised her hand and said, "I'm just here to deliver supplies." In fact, the people inside had already run out of food. In the morning, they had eaten their last meal and were already prepared to starve. Then, they starved for less than an entire afternoon. Before the sun had even set, the supplies had already arrived. It was really fast. Xiao Qing calmly asked Alan to take out the food and water, and then comforted them. Several major survival bases have been discussing countermeasures. Before I came, I had already heard that they were gathering people to try to carry out a second rescue. Don't worry too much. A group of people in white coats who looked very embarrassed came out, and he quickly said, "Thank you very much for taking the risk to deliver the food. Let's sit inside first." Xiao Qing nodded. She took Dummy and Alan to follow these people in. She was sensitive to the fact that these people were like birds startled by the twang of a bow. Everyone's faces were filled with deep exhaustion and fear. However, Xiao Qing just thought that they had been besieged for a long time and were physically and mentally exhausted, and did not think in other directions. Until she sat down, Xiao Qing found that there was something wrong with the number of people. The news from the base was that there were a total of 30 researchers, and they had been carefully protected. Even if several of them died because of the zombie tide, there were still about 25 people left. However, Xiao Qing counted again and again, and there were only 25 people in this group. She couldn't say that all the members of the guard group were dead, right? Only the researchers were left. However, the leader of the researchers did not mean to talk more. He just asked Xiao Qing, "Miss, how did you get in here?" There were zombies outside, but Xiao Qing and the others could still enter the reservoir unscathed. They couldn't help but wonder. Xiao Qing smiled and said vaguely, "I have a special ability that can temporarily not be detected by zombies, but this ability can't protect too many people." Chapter 279. It was not that Xiao Qing was too vigilant, but it was the end of the world. Even in peacetime, there was a saying that one should not reveal their wealth, not to mention the end of the world. There were so many people sitting here, and no one knew what they were thinking. Moreover, her and Dai's identities must not be exposed. After Xiao Qing finished speaking, a few people's eyes revealed a strange light. They looked at Xiao Qing with a strange, eager, and indescribable feeling. Xiao Qing felt uncomfortable being stared at. The researcher who spoke first quickly glared at those people and said, "It's almost dark now. You must be tired from delivering the supplies. Why don't you take a rest first? Someone will keep watch at night, so you don't need to worry. You should rest well." Xiao Qing felt a little strange, but she didn't say much. She took Lon and Dai to rest. She saw clearly that the person with the highest status in this group should be the one sitting in the center. He was older, with wrinkles on his face, and looked a little old-fashioned. The one who kept talking should be his assistant. However, Xiao Qing was too lazy to ask too much. She took Dai and Lon to rest. A paranormal took them to a room and said coldly, "Don't come out at night if there's nothing wrong. It's dangerous outside." Then he left. There was a feeling of something wrong everywhere. Xiao Qing didn't want to think more, but she couldn't help thinking more than usual. After the three of them stayed in the room for a while, someone brought in some hot dry food. They had been trapped for a long time, and someone brought them food. They should be more energetic. However, whether it was the person who led them here or the person who brought them food, they all looked tired, cold, and desperate. After a simple meal, Xiaoqing told the two people, "I feel something is wrong. We should be careful at night. After all, the situation is special now. We don't know what will happen at night. Lon, you go to sleep. Dai and I will keep watch at night." Lon nodded obediently and quickly got into the quilt. But after a while, she sat up with the quilt and said with a bitter face, "I can't sleep. When I close my eyes now, I see the zombie crowd outside." Xiaoqing smiled and put a stool at the door. "I'll keep watch here. If there's anything, I'll inform you. Go to sleep." Lon turned over and over. After a while, she covered her head with the quilt and curled up. Xiaoqing leaned against the back of the chair. As soon as she sat down, Dai rushed over and hugged Xiaoqing's waist intimately. He hadn't been alone with Xiaoqing for a long time. Since the last time he came back, there was an annoying Yan Qiue beside Xiaoqing. He had been fighting with him for Xiaoqing. Humph. I hate Yan Qiue the most. He wants to snatch everything. Even half of Xiaoqing's bed was occupied by him. Therefore, Dai was very happy that he could be alone with Xiaoqing this time. Finally, they could spend some time together. As for Lon, he had completely ignored her. Xiaoqing sighed helplessly and caught Dai, who rushed over. The space in the chair couldn't accommodate two people, so Dai curled himself up in Xiaoqing's arms. This posture was too uncomfortable. Xiaoqing pouted her lips. "There's another seat over there. Sit by yourself. Why are you sitting on my lap?" Dai pretended that he didn't hear her and curled up obediently. Fortunately, his body was soft. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to do it. After all, he was a man with a relatively broad frame. Even if he looked a little younger, his frame wasn't small. Xiaoqing didn't want to scold Dai, so she had to indulge him. They kept this posture until late at night. Xiaoqing, who was a little sleepy because Dai was in her arms, suddenly heard a shrill scream. Chapter 280. This voice was clearly from a woman, and it was filled with despair and fear. Xiaoqing remembered that she had seen two women during the day. One was ordinary and hard to remember, while the other was wearing a white coat and following beside the old man. She looked quite delicate and pretty. As soon as the voice rang out, Lon, who was not sleeping deeply, immediately woke up. She looked at Xiaoqing with a panicked expression. When she saw Xiaoqing's calmness, she miraculously calmed down a little. The three of them hurriedly went out the door and followed the direction of the voice. They lived a little further away from the scene of the incident. When they arrived, there were already many people there. Everyone's face was filled with deep despair. Xiaoqing walked to the front of the crowd. Then, she saw a woman in a white coat with a delicate face sitting on the ground with a pale face. Her face was covered in cold sweat, and even her facial features were twisted into a ferocious look because of deep fear. Not far in front of her was a corpse. It should have been a corpse that had died not long ago, because the corpse was still steaming. The reason why the corpse was steaming was because the skin below the neck had been peeled off, revealing a blurry layer of flesh and the texture of the muscles. The corpse's limbs were all twisted beyond recognition. His stomach was also cut open. His intestines were pulled out very long and wrapped around his neck several times. It looked like he had strangled himself with his intestines. The only thing that was intact was his head. His face was filled with horror and deep despair. His tongue was pulled out very long, broken, and stuffed back in. The old man squeezed through the crowd and walked in. Beside him was the middle-aged man who had spoken during the day. He glanced at the tragic corpse on the ground with a serious expression. After a while, he said, "Take it down and bury it. Everyone, go back to sleep." Xiaoqing was slightly puzzled by his calm reaction. At this time, shouldn't they investigate? At the very least, they should investigate the cause of his death and then raise their vigilance. And this old man seemed to be used to this kind of scene, unless, in these days of being surrounded, similar things had happened so many times that they even knew who was the one who did it. However, if it was the zombies outside who had the ability to come in, why didn't they rush in and kill all of them instead of killing them one by one? This was not in line with the habits of zombies. If it was a human, it would be even more unreasonable. If they knew who the murderer was, they could just catch him. If they didn't know, they could at least investigate. In short, this kind of situation was too wrong. Before Xiaoqing could figure it out, the woman sitting on the ground suddenly attacked. She pulled at her hair as if she had gone crazy. Her eyes, which were dilated because of fear, were particularly empty. With resentment, she stared at Xiaoqing and screamed, "It's them. They must have brought the demon in. Otherwise, why would those monsters come in?" As she spoke, she covered her face. Only her eyes were exposed from the gaps between her fingers. She looked at Xiaoqing and others with resentment. The crowd immediately began to whisper. They seemed to have forgotten that it was Xiaoqing who brought the food. Everyone looked at Xiaoqing with strange eyes. After being besieged for so long, the pressure, despair, and the approach of death had almost driven them crazy. The old man frowned and whispered, "Enough. Don't talk nonsense. Qing Mei, you take and ran back. She is frightened. You have to appease her." The ordinary-looking woman responded and stepped forward to help the woman named Enran. Enran had probably collapsed. She covered her face all the way. She just looked outside through the gaps between her fingers. Her mouth was still muttering something. Chapter 281. When she passed by, Xiaoqing could hear what she was saying. Enran was muttering, "They came to collect the debt. None of them can escape. None of them can escape." Xiaoqing couldn't help but feel goosebumps all over her body. She only felt that everything here was strange. These people seemed to know the truth, but it also seemed that no one knew. They were already in despair, already crazy, already on the verge of collapse. The old man walked over. He seemed to want to smile, but because he had always maintained a cold expression, it made his smile look especially awkward. It was like a fake smile. "I'm sorry. You guys should go back and rest. It's almost dawn." Alon seemed to want to ask something, but Xiaoqing grabbed her hand and said, "Old mister, you too, will go back first." He looked at Dai and then left with the middle-aged man. Xiaoqing also went back with Dai and Alon. At this moment, it was already 3:00 in the morning. It was the most sleepy time of the day, but the three people were not sleepy at all. As soon as they returned to the room, Alon couldn't help but ask Xiaoqing, why didn't anyone check it? Why do they all seem to be used to it? Why is the whole thing so weird? Xiaoqing patted Alon on the shoulder. There were a lot of guesses that she couldn't tell her, so she just said, "The situation is special now. What we have to do is to wait quietly and wait for rescue. There are some things that the more you don't know, the safer it is. You go back to sleep, it's almost dawn." Alan's shoulders softened, and she sat on the bed, but she didn't sleep. She just curled herself into a ball. Xiaoqing sighed. She had a terrible headache. She led Dai and stood in front of the window, her mind in a mess. Since she couldn't fall asleep now, Xiaoqing thought about the whole thing from beginning to end. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. In the end, she was too lazy to think about it. She leaned her head on Erdai's shoulder and began to think about leaving. The rescue team should arrive in a few days. After completing this task, she wanted to bring Erdai and the others to the south. The climate in the south was mild and suitable for the growth of plants. She wanted to travel there and look for high-level mutated plants to fill the gap in her hands. The next day, those people returned to normal. Although they still looked very dispirited and hopeless, they were much better than last night. When Xiaoqing was eating, she also looked around, but she didn't see Enran, nor did she see Qing Mei. Presumably, she hadn't recovered yet, so it was inconvenient for her to come out and eat. The whole day passed in a daze. At night, as Xiaoqing expected, another person died. This time, the one who died was a little older. His death was particularly tragic. His body was hung on a tree, and his internal organs and other things were hanging outside. What was even worse was that his two eyes were dug out and stuck on a branch next to him. The atmosphere of despair surrounding the people became more intense. Everyone seemed to be lingering with death. Xiaoqing couldn't help but frown every time she saw it. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoqing lived here for 3 days and witnessed 3 tragedies. After these 3 tragedies were summarized by Xiaoqing, she found the following similarities. First, the deceased were all researchers. Everyone was wearing a white coat. Second, they all died very miserably. They were all tortured to death. Although there were many doubts, Xiaoqing couldn't figure out who the homicidal maniac was. It wasn't until the 4th day that the news came in that the rescue team had assembled and was about to come. Even if such good news came, these survivors were not very excited because of it. However, the zombies seemed to know that the rescue team would arrive soon and finally launched a general attack. Chapter 282. The zombies were going to attack the reservoir. As soon as the news came back from the patrol team, everyone entered a state of readiness. Don't look at the number of people left here. There were not many, but many of them were researchers without the strength to truss a chicken. Many of them had no abilities. Even if they had abilities, most of them were brain mutations. For example, making their memory better. They had no fighting power at all. Therefore, the heavy responsibility was shouldered by the remaining guards. Everywhere was filled with the gloomy atmosphere of a coming storm. Xiaoqing walked around in a circle. Everyone was preparing for war. Only Enran was not. She was crazy. Every day, she would sit by the window, holding a small flower, staring blankly at the sky. Sometimes, she would look at the earth wall and murmur a sentence or two. Qing Mei was also a person with abilities. In order to prepare for war, she was not by Enran's side. Xiaoqing stopped by the window and could not help but look at Enran. Enran looked at Xiaoqing with a pair of dark eyes. After a long while, he said, "It's all retribution." Xiaoqing frowned slightly. She always felt that Enran also knew a lot. She lowered her voice and asked, "The murderer, who is it?" It's the devil." Enran found it difficult to suppress the fear in her eyes. She grabbed Xiaoqing's arm in a panic and said, "Go, run, the devil is coming." Then she began to walk around the room shouting the words, "The devil is coming." Xiaoqing crushed the small flower in her hand. Her thoughts were very complicated. During the day, the zombies would not attack. They were also gathering and accumulating strength. When the sun went down, it was estimated that it would be time for them to really attack. When Xiaoqing came out, she promised to take Lan back. So she told Lan many times that she must not leave her side. Erdai was very obedient. Knowing that her mind was in a mess, he massaged her temples and shoulders. When Xiaoqing was about to fall asleep with her eyes closed, he secretly kissed Xiaoqing's forehead. Finally, at night, the attack of the zombies was about to begin. These people, compared to the zombies outside, were simply pitiful. They had already sent out a distress signal. As long as they could hold on until the reinforcements arrived, there would still be a chance. Xiaoqing was now worried that Yan Hanqing and the others would barge in. After all, she was still inside. If they were impulsive and really rushed in, it would be bad. At that time, no matter what kind of damage there would be, it was not something Xiaoqing wanted to see. Now, she could only pray that Yan Hanqing and the others would listen to her and obediently join the reinforcements. As soon as the sun went down, the zombies began to attack. They destroyed the first defense. Xiaoqing took Air Dai and a Falon to join the rest of the people. They saw with their own eyes how the zombies destroyed the first defense wall. It was completely pushed down by violence. But there was a problem. They obviously had the ability to push down the defense wall. Why did they just surround and not attack? However, at this point, no matter how many doubts there were, they could only put aside for the time being. The old man organized the rest of the researchers and began to retreat in an orderly manner. The second defense wall could not last long. They had to retreat into the house and rely on the building to fight with the zombies. They retreated into a large warehouse. They did not know what it used to be used to store things. Anyway, it was very empty now, and the ground was covered with dust. As soon as they came in, they sealed the door first, hoping to hold on for a while. Soon, the zombies broke the second defense wall. They could even hear the zombies' claws constantly scratching the wall. Chapter 283. The rustling sound made people feel very uncomfortable. The group of people in the warehouse were frightened. Soon, the windows suddenly broke, and a black shadow came in. Immediately, countless superpowers were aimed at it, as if they wanted to tear it apart. However, it was very fast. It directly went into the crowd, grabbed the neck of a man in a white coat, and began to bite. Xiaoqing saw it clearly. It was a young male zombie. It had shark-like teeth, but its appearance was infinitely similar to that of a human, except that it was blind in one eye. The man in the white coat didn't have any superpower at all, so he was bitten to death in an instant. It jumped up and targeted the old man. When it jumped up, it screamed shrilly, and its voice was full of resentment. Then, it ignored the others and directly rushed to the old man. The old man was very calm. He counted and then said, 04796, Fire Superpower Possessors, go. A Fire Superpower Possessor walked out. As soon as the fireball in his hand fell on the zombie, it screamed and its skin seemed to be on fire. A high-level zombie like it shouldn't be so afraid of fire, but it was as if it was on fire. It happened so fast that many people didn't have time to react. By the time they reacted, the zombie had already escaped through the window. At this moment, Xiaoqing's face was expressionless as she looked at the window. She suddenly connected everything together, and the answer she received shocked her. However, she was just guessing. There were some things that she couldn't confirm. Hiding in the warehouse, there were fewer places where they had to face zombies, so they were much safer. However, it was also very difficult to defend. Once they were broken through, they would die. There was nowhere to run. After driving away the zombie, the whole warehouse fell into silence. After a long time, a voice was heard. That's 04796. The old man suddenly raised his head and looked at the speaker. Then, his face changed. Yi, now is not the time for you to talk nonsense. The man named Yi was a very thin young man wearing glasses. He looked weak, and his face was very pale. However, his words were very cold. I tried to persuade you many times, but you didn't listen. Now, it's all karma. Lu Dong, believe it or not, if the warehouse is broken, you will be the last one to die, because they don't want you to die. The old man, who was Lu Dong, suddenly became very angry. He said coldly, Yin Yi, do you think you are a good person? I'm not a good person, but anyway, I didn't experiment on living people. Yin Yi smiled and then said, now, they are back for revenge, Lu Dong, I'm watching. Shut him up. Lu Dong suddenly turned his head and looked at Xiaoqing coldly. Immediately, someone covered Yin Ye's mouth and dragged him to a corner to calm him down. Xiaoqing suddenly understood. She was wondering why there were suddenly so many high-level zombies with different appearances. Why those zombies would surround them and kill them every day, but they didn't break through in one go. He also understood why those people had died so miserably. One sentence explained everything. Using living people for experiments. Japan used to like to do human experiments. However, before the apocalypse, when it was still peaceful, such experiments were forbidden. Once discovered, they would be attacked by other countries. But after the apocalypse, when there was no one to restrain those people, they actually did human experiments without any scruples. Listen to the number, 04796. That meant that before it, there were at least 4,795 experimental subjects. Where did so many experimental subjects come from? All of them were living people. These people are insane. Xiaoqing's eyes were cold. When she looked at those people again, it was as if she was looking at dead people. It was too disgusting. How could they do such a crazy thing? Thinking of those strange zombies that they met on the way here, there was a little girl among them. This could no longer be described as crazy. They were simply a group of beasts. No, they were worse than beasts. Miss Xiaoqing, please go over there. Two people came over and said, please, but their eyes were threatening. Xiaoqing didn't resist. She had to make things clear first. Dumbo, Xiaoqing and Lon were invited to Yin Ye's side and watched over as if they were under house arrest. Yin Yi hugged his legs and calmly looked out the window at the zombies baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Because the glass was broken, they had to attack to fill the gap so that the zombies couldn't come in through the window. So they held on for a few more hours. Yin Yi sneered and closed his eyes. He was too lazy to look at them. Xiaoqing saw that those people didn't have time to care about them, so she asked in a low voice, can you tell me, those things? Yin Yi looked at her expressionlessly, are you curious? Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She just looked at Yin Yi. Yin Yi bit his nails and said after a while, I'm a researcher. I used to be the deputy director of the institute. Later, because I strongly opposed human experiments, I'm nothing now. But I couldn't stop them from carrying out such a crazy experiment. In the third week after the apocalypse, they carried out their first experiment. All the people used for the experiment were survivors. They caught zombies and bit the survivors, then observed the process of them turning into zombies and recorded it down. That was the beginning. Later on, they became crazier and crazier, and they became more and more unrestrained. Not only ordinary people, but also some paranormals who had just awakened, some paranormals who weren't very strong, or some paranormals who had special abilities and weren't very valuable, became their experimental subjects. After a long time of torment, he was so thin that only his bones were left. Xiaoqing patted him on the shoulder and was stunned. She glanced at Yin Yi again but didn't say anything. Yin Yi was hiding something, and Xiaoqing knew that. But everyone had their own secrets, so she didn't want to ask. The biggest problem now was that she didn't want this group of beasts with human faces to reach the capital alive. It was better for such disgusting things to be burned to ashes and buried in the ground. That would be more suitable for them to return to their homeland. Enyi continued, the group of zombies outside was led by the experimental subjects at that time. They surrounded them but didn't kill them. In fact, they wanted to torture this group of people until they collapsed bit by bit. They wanted to make them suffer a fate worse than death, and then kill them. But they didn't expect that the reinforcements would come so quickly. Chapter 285. Xiao Qing nodded. She didn't say what she was going to do. She just sat in the corner. When she closed her eyes, the daughter seeds had been quietly spread out. Any paranormals who hadn't reached level 4, or those with special abilities, would be quietly infiltrated by her daughter seeds. In other words, the life and death of this group of people were in her hands. However, Xiao Qing understood that these people could die, but they had to have nothing to do with her. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome. By the time night had completely fallen, everyone was exhausted. Wave after wave of attacks had exhausted their physical strength. If this continued, their defenses would be breached very soon. Before the new wave of attacks came, what they needed to do was to change the defense. Those who were resting would take the place of this group of people. One of them suddenly said, "Why do I feel so cold? The weather is changing more and more." Xiao Qing looked out of the window. Countless zombies were wandering. At this time, a sharp howl sounded. Another wave of attacks began. At night, there was no light. The whole warehouse was dark. Xiao Qing could clearly see cracks on the door and windows. There was a very simple principle called thermal expansion and contraction. Xiao Qing had to admit that those experimental subjects were very smart. They used ice and fire powers to break the last barrier under the cover of the night. If she didn't know those things, Xiao Qing would definitely remind them. However, after knowing everything, Xiao Qing didn't want to remind these beasts. No, calling them beasts was simply an insult to beasts. Lambs would kneel for milk, crows would feed back, and these beasts were completely heartless. Soon, the doors and windows were completely broken. Those who had just changed the defense didn't have time to react. Zombies poured in. There were several different zombies in the zombie crowd. In addition to the little girl, the blind boy, and the young man with the baby zombie in his chest, there were several other zombies with different appearances. One of them was a woman. Her appearance was very gentle, especially her pair of gentle eyes. Other than the scare of her eyes being a little smaller, she looked very normal. However, the skin and flesh on her hands were almost completely rotten. Moreover, they seemed to be much thicker than a normal person's arms. The other was a young man. His face was pale, but there was a bulge on his back, which made him look like a born turtle. He was bare-chested. When he turned around, people could see that there was a woman's face on his back. It was a woman's face that looked exactly like him. The woman could even talk. She had been crying softly. "Brother, brother, I'm in pain." It was said that those who were older either died on the operating table or were destroyed after the experiment because they were worthless. There were only a few experimental subjects left. The one who controlled the zombie crowd was the baby zombie living in the young man's chest. Its body was weak, so it had to rely on the young man to move. The group of researchers almost went crazy. What could be more terrifying than their experimental subjects coming back for revenge? Xiao Qing looked at the group of experimental subjects indifferently. She didn't want to do anything. It seemed that she didn't need to do anything. The only thing she had to think about now was how to take Lan and Enyi away. She and Dai would definitely be fine, but Lan and Enyi would attract the attention of the zombies. Those people had now collapsed. They almost gave up resisting, but at this time, there was a light not far away, and there was a lot of noise. Chapter 286. Lu Dong's old voice was heard. "Look, the rescuers are here. Hold on a little longer. Just a little longer and we'll be rescued." Only then did those people pull themselves together and carry out the last resistance, fighting and retreating, waiting for rescue. Those zombies also became anxious, seeing that the rescue team was about to arrive. If they did not quickly end the battle, they would be surrounded. Maybe some of them can survive this time. Even God doesn't help them. Yin Ye's disappointed voice sounded in Xiao Qing's ears. He said in a low voice, "When it's over, you have to be careful. They won't let you, who know their secret, live. You." Before Xiao Qing could finish speaking, she saw Yin Yi stand up and slowly walk toward Lu Dong. Lu Dong was very vigilant. As soon as he heard the footsteps, he turned his head. "Yin Yi, what are you doing?" Yin Yi didn't say anything, but the white coat on his body fluttered as if it was blown by the wind. When he was about to approach Lu Dong, his clothes were instantly torn apart, and several black tentacles shot out in an instant. The two people standing in front of Lu Dong had their bodies pierced by the tentacles in an instant. Then, Yin Yi quickly took a step forward, and the other tentacles wriggling around him aimed at Lu Dong. Lu Dong took 2 steps back in panic. Soon, he calmed down. Yin Ye's tentacles seemed to be stuck on an invisible barrier and couldn't move forward. "You actually..." Lu Dong was so frightened that he lost his voice. Yin Yi glanced at him and seemed to know that he wouldn't be able to kill Lu Dong today. He turned his head to the others and the other experimentals quickly gathered with Yin Yi. Only then did Xiao Qing understand why she kept feeling that something was amiss when Yin Yi was telling the story. How could those controlled experimental subjects escape so easily? They were obviously set free by Yin Yi. He watched Lu Dong and the others do such a thing, but he couldn't do anything to stop them. Under the torment of conscience and guilt, Yin Yi did something crazy. He injected himself with the zombie virus and then experimented on himself. Obviously, Yin Yi had successfully modified himself. Then, he carried out the second step of destroying Lu Dong and the others. He secretly released the experimental subjects and then led this group of experimental subjects to take revenge. There was one thing that Yin Yi didn't tell her, but Xiao Qing knew that Lu Dong's experiment wasn't as simple as Yin Yi said. They seemed to have transplanted parts of zombies or mutant animals into superpowered people's bodies. For example, the eyes on the little girl's face, which clearly didn't belong to her, the arms of the young man, and finally the tentacles on Yin Ye's body. They were destined not to be able to kill Lu Dong today because they didn't know how long Lu Dong's spiritual barrier could last. Therefore, what they needed to do was to kill as many researchers as possible. When there were very few people left, the rescue team finally arrived. Yin Yi waved his hand and said, "Retreat." When they passed by Xiao Qing said softly to Yin Yi, "Don't worry, he won't live long." "Thank you very much." Yin Yi lowered his voice and said. The zombies retreated like a tide. The rescue team was dumbfounded. They were ready to fight hard and lose a lot of people, but those zombies ran away by themselves. But it was a good thing after all. The leaders of several bases hurried into the warehouse. As soon as they entered, they saw corpses everywhere. Only Lu Dong and the other 3 people in white coats were still alive. Of course, Xiao Qing and the others were more conspicuous. One of the leaders of the bases hurriedly said, "Sorry, we came late. It took us some time to gather people, but we didn't expect." Some people who were looking at Xiao Qing and the others with vigilant eyes also breathed a sigh of relief. It was better to be safe than sorry. After Dumbo E proved his identity, Lu Dong became dispirited. He had originally made a guess. Since he was at the end of the road, he had no choice but to try to bite Xiaoqing. Unexpectedly, he had guessed wrong. As long as Xiaoqing revealed what he had done, not only would his reputation be ruined, but he would also be put under house arrest. Lu Dong had enjoyed a lifetime of glory, a lifetime of being high and mighty. How could he allow Xiaoqing to ruin everything? However, Xiaoqing didn't seem to want to say it out. She took Lan's hand and went to Qin Zishi. She handed Lan to Qin Zishi and said, "I brought her back safely, but she was scared out of her wits. You have to give her a raise." Qin Zishi smiled, and two small dimples appeared. "Don't worry." A group of people came and went back in a mighty manner. It was as if they didn't have anything to do. They didn't leave directly, but stayed in the reservoir. After all, the dead bodies had to be dealt with. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if they turned into zombies. What's more, it's nighttime. What if they get attacked by zombies? So, they had to stay here and wait for dawn to return to the base. Xiaoqing calmly gathered her friends and called Qin Zishi. After all, Lan was there. Qin Zishi would definitely know the inside story. It was better for her to have the final say. After everyone was gathered, Xiaoqing checked to see if anyone was eavesdropping. Then, she told her friends everything that had happened in the past 2 days, including her guess. Gu Pan Pan was the most bad-tempered one. She jumped up and was ready to kill Lu Dong and his friends. What the hell? How can such scum deserve to live? I'll send them to hell. Don't be impulsive. Didn't you see that he has already pointed the finger at me today? He's just worried that I'll expose everything he's done. I originally wanted to expose all these things, then ruin his reputation and let him die painfully. But I thought of another point. According to Yin Yi, the General Research Institute of the capital city is quite clear about their affairs. In other words, they don't mind Lu Dong's human experiments. If this matter is exposed, will they protect Lu Dong? I don't want to bet on whether they have a conscience or not, so I'm going to suppress this matter for the time being and do it myself. Xiaoqing said lightly. She couldn't trust the senior management of the capital city anymore. Instead of hoping that they would deal with Lu Dong, she would do it herself. Chapter 288. Qin Zishi was calmer than Xiaoqing imagined. He bit his nails and said after a while, "I think it's feasible." Xiaoqing nodded. It was not that her idea was too dark, but the world was like this. All the crows in the world were equally dark. Instead of hoping that the capital would do something to Lu Dong, she would rather do it herself. What was the saying again? Do it yourself to get enough food and clothing. Something seemed wrong. In short, Xiaoqing was ready to kill. She would not let Lu Dong reach the capital. After a peaceful night, Lu Dong requested to set off early the next morning. He would not be at ease until he reached the capital. It was not his fault that he was timid. It was just that he had been on tenterhooks all this time. He had reached the bottom line. If it went on like this, he would collapse before anyone could kill him. Only when he reached the capital, contacted the research institute, and got his personal protection, could he be at ease. Xiaoqing was too lazy to pay attention to him. She was teaching Dai how to speak sentence by sentence. Yesterday's sentence was like a flash in the pan. No matter how Xiaoqing guided Dai could not say a word. Looking at his aggrieved appearance, Xiaoqing sighed helplessly. She had a long way to go. Since the morning, Lu Dong had been emphasizing that Xiaoqing wanted to harm him and wanted others to separate them. The person in charge of the survival base in S City patted Xiao Qing's shoulder and said, "I heard that the researcher beside him is a zombie who has been hiding for a long time. He is probably scared. Now everyone looks like a zombie to him. We can only temporarily separate you and him. Sorry for the inconvenience." Xiao Qing waved her hand and said, "I understand. Anyway, he will be sent back to the capital soon. Out of sight, out of mind." The more isolated they were, the easier it would be to do it. No one would suspect her. After all, no one would think that she would do something to Lu Dong when Lu Dong had been targeting her. The darkness under the light was like that. The more Lu Dong targeted her, the less suspicious she would be when something happened. Xiao Qing was very leisurely. She even had time to cut fruits and share them with her friends. She was now waiting for nightfall. Once nightfall arrived, it would be her home ground. They did not directly send Lu Dong and the others to the capital. Instead, they first returned to the nearest base to rest and reorganize. Then, they mobilized a portion of their men to act as escorts to send Lu Dong back to the capital. The first night after leaving the reservoir was not spent in the base. They set up camp on the spot. In order to protect Lu Dong's tent was set up in the center. The others' tents surrounded his tent several times. He had also set up 4 night watch squads to take turns with each other. If anything were to happen, they would be able to react quickly and protect Lu Dong. In the evening, they ate pork bone soup stewed with vegetables. The soup was freshly cooked and the vegetables were fresh. The taste was very delicious. After eating, Xiao Qing and the others went into the tent to conserve energy. Night came quickly. In the wee hours of the morning, Xiao Qing woke up from her sleep. She plucked a petal of the autumn lotus and tore through space. After the evolution of her special ability, Xiao Qing's control over the power of space had become much smoother. Although she could cross space through cracks before, the landing point and distance were all within a general range. Now, she could control it very carefully. For example, when she appeared in Lu Dong's tent from her tent, Lu Dong and the others were sleeping very soundly. Especially after the fragrance of the autumn lotus slowly filled the air, they slept even more soundly. Xiao Qing picked one out of the 4 who had escaped the net. Of course, this person was not Lu Dong. She would let Lu Dong die in the end, dying in endless fear and despair. Chapter 289. After selecting the target, Xiao Qing calmly took out tape and sealed his mouth. Then, the daughter in his body woke up. No matter how deep asleep a person was, they would be awakened by the pain. When the person woke up, he found that his mouth was sealed and his body was tied up. He couldn't even moan. Lu Dong and the others were sleeping beside him, but he couldn't ask for help. He could only feel something raging in his body, taking away his life bit by bit. He was like a fish on a chopping board. He couldn't resist at all. He didn't know why, but he remembered that when he was doing experiments in the past, those people on the experiment table were also in despair at that time. They couldn't resist, they couldn't even struggle. They could only watch as the scalpel cut open their skin and even their stomachs. They looked at their own bodies, like pigs being slaughtered, spread out on the operating table. Their fresh organs were still beating. The next morning, Lu Dong woke up late. This was the best sleep he had in a while. There were no roars of zombies, no rotting smell, no despair, and no fear. Then he opened his eyes and saw the corpse hanging in the tent. The naked corpse was hung in the posture of a victim in Western mythology. The body was full of scars, and there wasn't even a piece of intact skin. The most frightening thing was that his eyelids had been cut off, revealing his protruding eyeballs. The corners of his mouth had also been cut open into a smile. Blood was like lipstick, smeared all over his cracked mouth. It was bright red, making him look like a clown who was juggling. Bloody horror, and indescribable panic. How did he die? Lu Dong didn't know at all. He even slept soundly and had a beautiful dream. In the dream, he returned to the capital, entered the research institute, and used his power to capture Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing was lying on the operating table for the experiment, and he could do whatever he wanted to her. However, when he woke up, his companion died in such a horrible way. Did the experimental subjects come back for revenge? No. They had already left. Lu Dong's eyes became red and bulging because of excessive fear and panic. He was stunned for a few seconds before he rolled out of the tent. Someone died. That blood-curdling scream reverberated throughout the entire campsite. Xiaoqing flipped over in her bed and smirked. She slowly got up and changed her clothes without any hurry. Then, she led her son and a group of friends in the direction of the sound. Lu Dong had been carried up by the paranormals who had heard the commotion. His legs were weak, and he almost lost control of his bowels. To be honest, he had seen countless corpses that were even more terrifying than this one. He had even created many terrifying corpses with his own hands. However, when this corpse became his companion, when his life was also threatened, everything was different. Many people entered the tent and untied the corpses. When they untied the corpses, they realized that the corpses had been hung up with strips of bed sheets. When the corpses were brought out, the faces of the people in charge of the bases were very ugly. The people on night patrol were the best of the best in their bases. However, someone had been killed, and tortured to death at that, and the people on night patrol had not noticed at all. It was a slap in the face. One of the people in charge took a deep breath, and then called the people in charge of night patrol over. Did you hear any suspicious sounds or see any suspicious people last night? Chapter 290. They all blushed and shook their heads. As night patrols, they were very serious. They didn't slack off at all. However, someone sneaked in, killed a man, and left without anyone noticing. Should they say that the person was too strong, or that they were too weak? Lu Dong was half broken at the moment. He was being held up, but he was still shouting, "Someone died right next to me. Right next to me. Do you all eat shit? Someone sneaked in and no one noticed it. You'll only pay attention to it when everyone's head is cut off one day, right?" Everyone's face turned pale. After all, the truth was too embarrassing, especially when the body was lying there. They didn't even need to explain. Lu Dong no longer had his usual seriousness and calmness. He jumped up and down and said, "It must be her. She must have colluded with the zombies. She wants to kill me." As he spoke, he pointed at Xiaoqing, his spittle flying far away. Xiaoqing, on the other hand, was very calm. She rolled up her sleeves and said, "You've been slandering me from the beginning. I didn't lower myself to your level because you were overly frightened. I originally thought that after you settled down for a day, you would be able to regain your calmness. I didn't expect that you would still pour dirty water on me. Does that mean that as long as someone dies, it's me who kills them? Does it mean that I colluded with the zombies? If you can't poop, will you blame me for blocking your ass?" Xiaoqing's words were vulgar, but it made many people feel happy. They really hated those who bit people like mad dogs. They didn't know how to look at people's faces. Except for ordering people around, they looked down on others. However, Lu Dong's status was high, so many people didn't dare to provoke him. Xiaoqing's words were exactly what they were thinking. Xiaoqing didn't stop. "According to your theory, if your wife has a baby, it's also mine, right? Why don't you go up to the sky and stand side by side with the sun? Do you want me to send you?" Mwah. She had a cold expression on her face as she said those sarcastic words in a serious manner. It was actually quite touching. Lu Dong was already on the verge of a mental breakdown, and now he was even more agitated. He pointed at Xiao Qing and shouted, "Is there a second possibility? It's you. It must be you. It must be you and those zombies working together. You and Yin Yi are the same. It's the same. All right, hurry up and bring him to take his medicine." Xiao Qing made a goodbye gesture and said, "You can't stop taking the medicine. Hurry up and feed him the medicine so that he won't be tormented later." Those paranormals also felt that Xiao Qing was right, so several of them carried Lu Dong away. Even when he was being carried away, Lu Dong was still cursing loudly. The others cleaned up the corpses and other things that needed to be cleaned up. Although they all believed that it wasn't Xiao Qing's doing, it was still very strange after all. They couldn't catch the culprit, so they were also panicked. Who knew who the culprit was? Was it really Lu Dong? Or was it targeting everyone? They couldn't help but panic at such a silent method of killing people. Could it be that the group of high-level zombies had returned? But why did they want to kill Lu Dong? It was like Lu Dong was a delicious cake. They had been besieging him since the beginning. TSK, TSK. Those who didn't know better would think that Lu Dong had slept with those zombies' wives. That was why they kept chasing him. Xiao Qing stretched herself and lazily calculated who she should kill next. That was the effect she wanted. She wanted Lu Dong to be terrified and desperate, but there was nothing he could do but watch his death coming. If she let him die so easily, how could she be worthy of those who were used as test subjects and died on the operating table? There were also those pitiful people who were still alive but could only watch as they turned into monsters. They would rather die a quick death. Chapter 291. She was not a saint, nor an angry youth. Sometimes, when her bottom line was crossed, she could turn into a shura. A shura would not win people over with virtue, nor would she influence people with kindness. She would only kill to stop killing. The next person to die had been decided. Xiao Qing took the snacks handed over by Dummy and gnawed on them. Although something like this had happened, they still had to go on. But they sped up their pace on the way back. If they didn't stay in the wild at night and return to the base, they should be fine. They didn't believe that those zombies could chase them to the base and kill them. Lu Dong obviously suffered a big blow. His hair was much whiter. During lunch, he was holding a bowl around the pot. His expression was a little dull. Xiao Qing didn't sympathize with him at all. Was old an excuse to do whatever he wanted? The more he flaunted his seniority, the more Xiao Qing hated him. He was already very old and should have been more clear-headed. He should have known what he was doing. However, he was the main culprit among the group of beasts. He was the initiator of everything. He was the perpetrator of all evil. Xiao Qing glanced at him. Her eyes became colder. She didn't want to make Lu Dong happy when she was unhappy. So, Xiao Qing silently activated the daughter in one of the researchers' bodies. Everyone was eating with their heads lowered, but one of the researchers beside Lu Dong suddenly swelled up like an inflated balloon. Lu Dong accidentally touched him. Like a punctured balloon, the researcher's body quickly exploded. At the moment of explosion, the daughter turned into ashes. There was absolutely no trace left. As the flesh and blood flew and fell to the ground, there was no trace left. Those pieces of flesh fell like rain, falling on Lu Dong's head, body, and bowl. He was completely stunned. He looked at the porridge in the bowl that was dyed red by the pieces of flesh. Then, he suddenly lay on the ground and began to vomit. He vomited very violently, as if he wanted to vomit out his internal organs. Not only him, but the people around him were vomiting too. After all, those pieces of flesh didn't have eyes. Not only did they fall on him, but they also fell on other people. It was just that Lu Dong had more. Imagine, while they were eating, a living person beside them suddenly exploded. Blood, flesh, and bones flew everywhere, and even fell into the bowl. Who wouldn't vomit if it happened to them? Other than vomiting, he was more afraid, especially Lu Dong. He felt like he was going crazy. Death was following him like a shadow, unwilling to let him go for even a moment. He even felt a chill run down his spine, as if the Grim Reaper's scythe was resting on his neck. Lu Dong vomited until he was dizzy, as if he was going to vomit out his internal organs. After he finished vomiting, he lay in the pool of blood with a dull look in his eyes and did not get up for a long time. If he could still identify Xiaoqing before, what about now? Xiaoqing sat calmly in the distance, eating his meal. However, there was another person beside him who died without an intact body. Most importantly, he didn't even know how that person died. He only saw him suddenly turn into a pile of flesh and blood, and then there wasn't even a corpse left. This was simply too terrifying and too alarming. Could it be that someone could remotely control other people's lives? If that was really the case, wouldn't it be too terrible? Not only Lu Dong was afraid, but more people were also afraid. They were afraid that they would become the next blood fireworks and explode with a crash. Some people even began to quietly stay away from Lu Dong. They finally realized that the thing behind their backs, who they didn't know whether it was a human or a ghost, seemed to be targeting Lu Dong and his survivors. At least, the ones who died so far were the researchers who had been with Lu Dong before, the survivors of this time's incident. As for the others, whether they were ordinary people or superpowered people, they were not affected. They couldn't help but think more about it. However, they were just guessing. Now, all of them were in a panic. Everyone was afraid that they would be the next person who suddenly died. No matter what, the base at least had to pretend. After this incident, few people still had the appetite to eat. Only a few people came forward and began to check the bodies. Although it was called a body, in fact, there was only a pile of minced meat left. There were also some bones that were not easy to break, but they were even more broken than the pig bones at the bottom of the soup. Those few people who had probably studied medicine before the doomsday were checking the bodies while retching. If they wanted to find something, at least a big piece of the body, and then check if there were any scars or internal injuries. But when they looked at the ground, the biggest piece was no bigger than a fist. How could they check it? No matter how good a doctor was, it was impossible to find any clues from a pile of minced meat. So, they were actually just going through the motions. After checking the bodies, they all shook their heads. No one found anything. One of the people in charge of the base had to say, "First, help President Lu up. Go and change your clothes. A few people come and clean up the scene." So, this person's death could only be left unsettled. What if they didn't find anything? They didn't even know how he died. It couldn't be that he had sat by the fire for too long because of thermal expansion and contraction, right? When Lu Dong was helped up, not only was his hair gray and had lost its luster, but his face was also wrinkled. There was no vitality at all. In the past, although he was old and had wrinkles, he had always been in good spirits. He looked a little younger than his actual age. But now, he was so old that he looked like a candle in the wind. It was as if he would die in the next second. After all, he had suffered 2 consecutive blows in one day. Each time, it was his only remaining companion who had died. Their deaths were extremely tragic. It was as if the group of experimental subjects had really come back for revenge. Even if his heart was made of iron, he couldn't take it anymore. Chapter 292. Now, there was only one person left, the one he had brought out of the institute. Lu Dong had a hunch that after this person died, it would be his turn. He had never felt so powerless, because he had always been in charge of other people's lives. This was the first time that his life was in someone else's hands. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, with the wind blowing behind him, as if it would push him off the cliff in the next second, but it didn't do anything. It made him so scared that sometimes he even thought that it would be better for him to die earlier, so that he wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. However, after the second person died, they arrived at the base. After entering the base, the rescue personnel organized by each base had to withdraw in batches. The rest of the elites were responsible for escorting Lu Dong to the capital. Since they arrived at the base, nothing had happened for a day and a night. Everyone was relieved. Even the person in charge of the base thought that it must be because the base was heavily guarded that those zombies couldn't get in. However, Lu Dong still yelled every day, saying that when he went to bed at night, he felt that someone was squatting at the head of his bed, quietly watching him. However, when he opened his eyes, that person was gone. At first, the person in charge of the base sent people to guard outside the house. He sent a whole team of 20 people to surround the house like an iron bucket. Even a fly or a mosquito couldn't fly in. However, when he got up the next day, Lu Dong still yelled that someone was quietly watching him in front of his bed at night. At that time, the person in charge of the base was a little annoyed. He sped up and sent all the rescue teams back, then gathered a team of superpowered people above level 3, ready to escort Lu Dong out. However, when he took the first step out of the base, the only researcher beside Lu Dong, who was heavily protected, exploded into a mass of bloody fireworks. This time, it was even closer than the last time. When the flesh and blood flew, it covered Lu Dong's entire body. His face and body were covered in sticky flesh and blood. When he breathed, the thick smell of blood wafted into his nose. Lu Dong had completely broken down. No matter what, he refused to leave the base. He looked around at the people protecting him in panic. He felt a cold gaze fall on him. It was filled with malice and murderous intent. It swept past his throat, his heart. When he tried to find that pair of eyes, he couldn't find them. He really broke down. He crawled back to the base and refused to go out again. The person in charge of the base had no choice but to arrange for many people to guard him. In fact, the person in charge was also a little panicked. How did this person die? There were more than 50 level 3 paranormals present. Among them, there was no lack of psychic paranormals with particularly sharp senses. However, none of them had discovered how the researcher had died. Just like that, he exploded into a bloody firework. It was very beautiful. If there was really someone targeting Lu Dong and the others in the dark, that person's strength was definitely very strong. Moreover, everyone began to suspect who had been targeting Lu Dong all this time. If it was like what Lu Dong said, the zombies were here for revenge, then why did the zombies keep chasing him? In theory, even if zombies had a certain level of intelligence, they wouldn't show such a terrifying ability to retaliate. Just like the zombie in the dark, its intelligence was much higher than that of ordinary humans. It had a premeditated plan to retaliate. The second question was, why did the zombies want to take revenge on Lu Dong? Could it be that Lu Dong had done something to make that zombie want to take revenge on him and torture him? Chapter 293. All kinds of questions were lingering in everyone's mind, but no one asked. Lu Dong seemed to have gone crazy. He started to shout whenever he saw someone. There was a zombie chasing after him. The zombie was watching him in the dark, wanting to take revenge on him. In order to make Lu Dong feel at ease, the base arranged several brave paranormals to sleep with Lu Dong at night. If someone really squatted at his bedside and watched him quietly, as Lu Dong said, then these paranormals would definitely find out. In the middle of the night, several paranormals were awakened by Lu Dong's scream. Someone! Someone! Lu Dong's face was distorted. He grabbed his short gray hair, and his face and eyes were full of horror. Those paranormals were startled. They hurriedly got out of bed, put on a vigilant posture, and turned on the light, but they didn't see anyone. They even searched under the bed, but they didn't even see a footprint, let alone a person. However, Lu Dong insisted that there were people around, and he didn't let them turn off the light. He sat in the corner with the quilt in his arms for the whole night. His spiritual power had been activated until his spiritual power was exhausted. The few paranormals had no choice but to sit with him. But nothing happened for one night, and several nights in a row, they couldn't stand it anymore. They all proposed to change shifts, and the leader of the base completely lost his patience. In his eyes, Lu Dong was now a madman. He didn't know what kind of shameful things he had done. If it weren't for Lu Dong's special identity, he really didn't even want to care about him. So the leader of the base directly refused to see Lu Dong, and just sent someone to take shifts to accompany him at night. Lu Dong was even more desperate. He didn't lie, and he wasn't scared out of his wits. He could clearly feel that someone was standing by his bed every night, looking at him with a bone-chilling gaze. He felt that his eyelids were dead, and he desperately wanted to open his eyes to see what that person looked like, but he couldn't open them. Sometimes he could even feel a cold blade across his neck, leaving a layer of goosebumps on his skin. That feeling was too terrifying. Many times, after he woke up, he didn't want to suffer this torture anymore. He wanted to end his own life, but he didn't have the courage. At this moment, Lu Dong realized that he had lived in vain all these years. The older he got, the more he feared death. Even at this stage, he still did not dare to pick up a knife and end his life. When he completely collapsed, he looked at himself in the mirror. His white hair was very messy, and his face was covered in layers of wrinkles. There were also dark circles under his eyes because he had not slept well for a long time. He was so old that he could not recognize him. At this moment, his mind was in a trance. He could even hear countless people demanding his life. The seeds of hatred sprouted in his body and grew continuously, eating away at his internal organs bit by bit. As if he was possessed, he walked to the highest floor of the base and jumped down. Lu Dong died in the middle of the night. The next morning, someone discovered that he had died at the bottom of the building. Because the building was very high, his face was unrecognizable from the fall. Only the wisp of a relieved smile at the corner of his mouth was chilling. Xiao Qing stood outside the crowd and watched for a long time. She only left when the base sent people to collect the body. This time, all the culprits had been executed. She could finally heave a sigh of relief and put down one of her worries. Next, she just needed to send Qin Zishi home. After returning to the temporary residence, Xiao Qing asked someone to call Qin Zishi over. The group had a celebratory feast together, and then Qin Zishi was ready to leave. Chapter 294. He didn't leave because he wanted to see that group of crazy people die with his own eyes. Now that Lu Dong was dead, it was time for him to go back. After dinner, Xiao Qing discussed with Qin Zishi. "Shall I send you back? It's on the way anyway. Why don't we leave tomorrow?" Qin Zishi was a little dazed. He was still chewing on biscuits like a little squirrel. There were still some biscuit crumbs on the corner of his pink lips. He looked at Xiao Qing in a daze and licked his lips with his little red tongue. After a while, he reacted and hurriedly said, "It's really not troublesome. I can go back by myself." He had already troubled Xiao Qing a lot. "It's on the way." Xiaoqing couldn't help but touch his hair. Then she said, I'm going to the capital. Let's go together. Qin Zishi didn't want to be separated from his friends, so he hesitated for a moment and nodded. Although he was still expressionless, he chewed on the biscuits much faster. Even the little hog on his head stood up a little. Xiaoqing's eyes had a hint of a smile. She rubbed his face. You can smile at times like this. You don't have to be so serious every day. Qin Zishi puffed up his cheeks and widened his eyes. I'm not young anymore. This is called dignity. My father is like this. His subordinates are all afraid of him. Several people were amused. They all said, yes, he is very dignified. Very dignified, yes, you're not young anymore. Xiaoqing touched Qin Zishi's head again. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes were full of smiles. Qin Zishi was a little disheartened. He muttered in a low voice, I'm really not young anymore. In a few months, I'll be 18. When they first met Qin Zishi, they thought that he was an arrogant young master with a bad temper. After spending some time with him, they realized that Qin Zishi was quite cute. Xiaoqing supported her chin with one hand. Watching her friends tease Qin Zishi, she felt that her mentality was much younger. Little Baozi rolled his eyes at the side, thinking of a plan. It seemed that Mama liked brother Xiaoxi very much. Sister Pan Pan and the others also liked him very much. Then, if he let brother Xiaoxi become his family, no one would object, right? Even if they found out that he was the one who did it, it wouldn't matter. Mama loved him so much, so she definitely wouldn't be fierce to him. The next day, they were ready to leave. Before they left, Lu Dong's body was being transported out. At the end of the world, cremation had become very important, because corpses could easily become food for mutated animals. It was safer to burn them. Moreover, it could cause diseases such as the plague. Therefore, as long as the conditions were met, most of the corpses would be burned and then buried. Xiaoqing and the others stopped at the door and waited until Lu Dong's body was carried away before they continued on their way. Gu Pan Pan muttered, what bad luck. When they went out, they actually went out with Lu Dong's body. If it wasn't bad luck, what was it? Xiaoqing and the others followed the funeral team from a distance. When they reached a fork in the road, several zombies suddenly fell from the sky. Several thick tentacles rolled up Lu Dong's body. Under the cover of several zombies, they quickly escaped. The funeral team was shocked. They had encountered many surprise attacks and ambushes by zombies. Every time, they would lose some of their companions. However, this was the first time that zombies came roaring. They didn't bite or kill people. They just took the body and ran away. Was this a joke? Now, those people really believed that there were zombies secretly following Lu Dong, trying to take revenge. Didn't they see that? Lu Dong was dead, and they didn't even want to let go of his body. Chapter 295. After the experiment subjects did that, Xiaoqing was completely cleared of suspicion. No one would associate it with her anymore. After all, the murderer had appeared. Xiaoqing did not stay for long and left with her friends. She walked to the other side of the fork. After walking for about 10 minutes, Xiaoqing poked Xiaotong's shoulder. The two of them had a good tacit understanding. Xiaoqing and Xiaotong looked at each other and understood what Xiaotong meant. Xiaoqing stopped and said lightly, brothers who have been following us secretly, don't hide anymore. Why don't you come out and have a chat? You've been following us all the way. It's quite tiring, isn't it? Soon, a chuckle came from behind Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing turned around and saw Yinyi as expected. He had taken off his white coat and changed into a simple casual outfit. There was a group of experimental subjects following him. The group of experimentals were all acting strangely, giving Gu Pan Pan and the others a fright. They immediately went on alert. Xiao Qing comforted Gu Pan Pan and the others, then said, "Why are you guys here?" "To thank you." Yin Yi smiled and said, "If it weren't for you, we might not have had the chance to kill Lu Dong, let alone let him be punished like this. I just got rid of a scum. You don't have to thank me." Xiao Qing glanced behind Yin Yi. There was a corpse dragged by a tentacle. She asked, "Where are you going?" "To Jiang City. I'll take them there and settle down." Yin Yi said bitterly, "You've seen what we look like. We can't be accepted by humans. Only zombies can accept us. You're very lucky. If you encounter any problems in the future that you can't solve, you can come to Jiang City to find us. As long as we can help, we won't refuse." Xiao Qing was silent for a moment. No matter what the reason was, no matter who did it, as long as they became like this, they were destined not to be accepted by humans. Xiao Qing looked at the experimental subjects and felt very sad. They used to have a normal life with their own families and friends. However, because of some selfish people, all of this was ruined. They became strange and did not even have the right to be human. However, these half-zombie experimental subjects were more affectionate and righteous than living people. Xiao Qing would rather be friends with them than get along with those scum in human skin. The experimental subject that looked like a baby crawled out of the young man's chest. He looked at Xiao Qing curiously and then quietly reached out his hand. His hand looked as if it had been soaked in water for a long time. It was pale and full of wrinkles. It looked very ugly. Xiao Qing gently held his small hand. The baby immediately smiled. As soon as he smiled, his mouth opened widely. Together with the fetal hair on his head, his extraordinarily large head, and his wrinkled facial features, it was a little scary. Xiao Qing did not dislike him at all. She gently kissed his forehead. The baby was even happier. He held Xiao Qing's hand and then opened his palm. In his palm was a high-level zombie nucleus. It was completely transparent. When the sunlight reflected, it looked very beautiful. The baby stuffed the nucleus into Xiao Qing's palm. How could Xiao Qing accept it? She gently patted the baby's head and then said, "I don't need it. You can take it." The baby was very stubborn. When he was pushed back, he was pushed back. In the end, he looked at Xiao Qing with his big eyes and felt very wronged. Yin Yi could not help but say, "Just take it." On the way here, Xiao Yu specially led us to sweep through a few places just to find a higher level crystal core for you as a gift. If you don't accept it, he'll be sad for a few days. Chapter 296. Xiao Qing had no choice but to accept it. Then, he took out a bunch of things and gave them to the baby called Xiao Yu. There were milk, drinks that babies could drink, food that Yan Chiue made that zombies could eat, some baby clothes, and toys. He gave them all to Xiao Yu. Xiao Baozi was very sensible and contributed a lot of snacks. After giving Xiao Yu a bunch of things, Xiao Qing said, "If there's a need, I'll definitely go to Jiang City. But you guys, be careful. Once people like them were discovered, they would be reduced to experimental subjects again." Yin Yi nodded, and then he said, "I've come here mainly because I need your help with something. Please go ahead." Xiao Qing couldn't help but take some clothes and snacks and gave them to another little girl. Yin Yi said, "I have a younger brother called Yin Zhao. We were separated at the beginning of the apocalypse. At that time, I was in the laboratory, and he and my mother were still living in our hometown. After the apocalypse, I tried many ways to contact him, but I couldn't. If you meet him, please take care of him for me. Okay. Xiaoqing nodded and said, can you describe his appearance to me? Or rather, what are his characteristics? My brother looks very delicate. Ever since he was young, everyone in the family said that he looked like a girl. Every time they said that, he would throw a tantrum. In the end, when he was 14, he got into a car accident and left a very long scar at the corner of his eye. It has never healed. Also, he hates people calling him Xiao Zhao because it sounds like Xiao Zhao from the dragon slaying heaven. When he recalled his brother, Yinye's expression became much gentler. He said sincerely, I'll have to trouble you. But with my current appearance, even if I find him, I can't take care of him, there will always be a way. The most important thing now is to find him. If I meet him, I'll take care of him for you. Xiaoqing couldn't help but pat Yinye's shoulder. Yinye smiled and said, we won't delay your journey. We're leaving. If you need anything, you must come to Jiang City to find us. I will. Xiaoqing nodded. Yinye then left with the group of people. As Xiaoyu was leaving, he leaned on the young man's shoulder and looked at Xiaoqing. He had never felt his mother's warmth, but today, he felt it from Xiaoqing, so he was reluctant to leave and a little sad. Xiaoqing's heart ached even more. If she had died back then and little Bun had survived, wouldn't he be as pitiful? Seeing that Xiaoqing was in a bad mood, the little Bun quietly reached out his little paw and held his mommy's hand. Then he whispered, Mommy. Smile. Xiaoqing rubbed her son's face and felt much better in an instant. She continued walking with her friends. No matter what, life had to go on. The most important goal now was to send Qin Zishi back to the capital. Little Bun's temper was like a gust of wind. It came and went quickly. Soon, he happily went to ride the bear. This bear was his new love. Every time he rode it, Yiya's legs would turn to jelly. As an authentic rabbit, Yiya was so scared that she almost peed. When she stood on the bear, her whole body was trembling. However, after so many times, she had gotten used to it. She could even stand on the bear's head and look into the distance with a serious rabbit face. Then, little Bun slapped her down and she rolled on the ground, crying. While little Bun was riding the bear, he kept thinking about how to make Qin Zishi his family. Firstly, he needed a chance for his mommy and Qin Zishi to be alone. Secondly, no one could have a chance to interfere. Chapter 297. Then, when the rice was cooked, everything would be settled. The plan was perfect. Little Bun rubbed his chin with a thoughtful expression. Then, he started to worry about how to create this opportunity. Sometimes, whatever one wanted to happen would happen. He was worried about not being able to create an opportunity for Mama and brother Xiaoxi to be alone together, and the opportunity came. At that time, the situation was like this. They had set up camp by the river, and Gu Pan Pan had suggested that they go to the river to catch some fish. Then, they would go to the vicinity to pick some wild vegetables and catch some prey. Then, they could have a sumptuous picnic. When little Bun heard that, he raised both his hands and feet in agreement. Originally, Xiaoqing was the main force in this matter, but when it was time to assign tasks, little Bun started to roll on the ground, saying that his stomach hurt. Thus, he succeeded in making Xiaoqing stay. Then, he hugged Qin Zishi's leg and refused to let him go, so Qin Zishi stayed too. Almost everyone else scattered, and even Xiao Tong followed Gu Pan Pan and Alan to pick wild vegetables. When they saw this, they let Xiaoqing and Qin Zishi stay behind to accompany little Bun. In any case, with Xiaoqing's strength, she definitely wouldn't encounter any danger. Once those people left, little Bun started to think about how to do it. He secretly thought of a way, and then very cleverly whined, Mama. I want to drink milk, Xiaoqing rubbed Little Bun's head. Your stomach doesn't hurt anymore. I'll warm it up for you. Mama is the best. Little Bun grinned. After watching Xiaoqing leave, he said to Qin Zishi, Brother Xiaoxi, can you help me look for Yiya? It ran out again. Qin Zishi nodded with a serious expression, and then also went out to look for it. When the two of them left, he secretly took out a flower from his little sunny pouch. The flower had red petals and was already somewhat dried up. He had once secretly eavesdropped on the conversation between the stall owner and the buyer. The stall owner said that this flower was called the 7 days acacia. Not only was its medicinal effect particularly strong, but it also did not harm the body. Even a woman could cling on to a man. As long as one petal was enough, raw rice could be cooked. He couldn't understand the first few sentences. He could only understand 2 sentences. The first sentence was that it wouldn't hurt the body, which meant that it wouldn't hurt his mama and brother Xiaoxi. The second sentence was that what's done cannot be undone. Didn't he want the raw rice to be cooked? That way, brother Xiaoxi wouldn't leave the spicy food. Therefore, he secretly took one and threw a crystal stone into the stall owner's box in embarrassment. Only then did he sneak away. He had to succeed in one go. Little Bun sneakily climbed down from the bed and walked to the table barefooted. Then, he secretly stuffed the flower petals into the kettle. He was afraid that the effect wouldn't be good enough, so he stuffed the whole flower in. After stuffing it in, the Little Bun got into the bed guiltily and turned around, waiting for Xiaoqing to come back. What if her mother found out? Would she be angry? What if she didn't want him anymore? Just as the Little Bun was letting his imagination run wild, Xiaoqing came in with a bottle of milk. Qin Zishi also came in with Yiya in her arms. The Little Bun immediately raised his little heart and was very nervous. It wasn't until Xiaoqing passed the milk bottle to him that he said softly, Mama, you drink too. Xiaoqing patted the Little Bun's head and felt that her son had healed her. She chuckled and said, Mama doesn't drink milk. Drinking water is enough. Then, Mama, I'll get you some water, the Little Bun said in a childish voice. Don't you have a stomachache? Don't bother yourself. Xiaoqing knocked the Little Bun's head. Then, she also felt that she couldn't let Qin Zishi just sit there, so she got up and poured a glass of water. The Little Bun stared at the glass of water eagerly. His heart was beating like thunder. Was it going to succeed? Chapter 298. What's that smell? Xiaoqing lowered her head and sniffed. There was a faint floral fragrance in the water. It was very light, with a hint of indescribable sweetness. The Little Bun almost jumped up. His eyes were as wide as a cow's. He rolled his eyes and rolled on the bed. Mama, my stomach hurts. Xiaoqing was not in the mood to find out where the fragrance came from. She quickly rubbed her son's stomach. Qin Zishi came over with Yiya in her arms. She frowned and said, Did he eat something wrong? Did he have a stomachache? Others might not know, but Xiaoqing knew very well that the Little Bun's body was half human and half zombie. How could he have a stomachache so easily? She rubbed the Little Bun's stomach and connected the dots in her mind. Actually, with her intelligence, she could have found something wrong long ago, but she was a mother. When her child was sick, her mind was already in a mess. That was why she did not discover the Little Bun's clumsy lie. Xiaoqing only realized it when Qin Zishi spoke. She looked at the Little Bun and then looked at Qin Zishi. She then said softly, Little Shi, can I trouble you to boil some water? I want to fill a hot water bag for the baby. Qin Zishi agreed. She put Yiya on the bed and went out. The Little Bun had already sensed that something was wrong. He held the quilt very nervously. Xiaoqing did not say anything. She just looked at him quietly. The little bun curled up again. He looked up at Xiaoqing guiltily. Xiaoqing asked, "Stomach hurts?" The little bun nodded and then shook his head quietly. His pitiful appearance made people feel sorry for him. Xiaoqing held back the pain in her heart. She squatted down and asked in a low voice, "What's in the water?" The little bun trembled and stuffed himself into the quilt. Xiaoqing poked him and asked again, "What's in the water?" The little bun stuffed himself into the blanket and refused to raise his head until Xiaoqing asked for the third time, "What's in the water?" Only then did little Baozi raise his head. His eyes were red. He sobbed and said, "The cook, what are you cooking?" Xiaoqing hardened her heart and continued to ask. The little bun sniffled and said, "It's already been cooked." As he spoke, he started to cry. Baby doesn't want Brother Xiaoxi to leave. I don't want to be separated from Brother Xiaoxi. I want to be family with Brother Xiaoxi. Once the rice is cooked, Brother Xiaoxi won't leave. Xiaoqing's mouth twitched. She finally understood what little Baozi meant by cooking rice. She was actually very angry because little Baozi had done all this behind her back and even schemed against her. This made her feel a little sad. She had risked her life to give birth to a son and raised a son. Now, he wanted to scheme against her. Not only did her heart feel cold, but it also hurt. But seeing little Baozi crying so sadly, Xiaoqing began to think about her own problems. Did she do something wrong? She thought that she had protected little Baozi well. She thought that she could let little Baozi grow up healthily and happily. But she forgot that he was a child. Children needed a childhood. But little Baozi followed her everywhere every day. Especially at the beginning of the apocalypse, he was always on the move and had no fixed place to stay. Danger lurked everywhere. Every day, he walked the line between life and death. He didn't have any toys, friends, or playmates. But he was obedient and sensible. He never asked her for anything or made any requests. His only friend was a rabbit. So, he always treated Yiya very well. When he got Yiya, he treated her like a treasure. Chapter 299. Did she do something wrong? So the little bun was not happy at all. Seeing the little bun cry so sadly, Xiaoqing's heart ached. She pursed her lips, but didn't know what to do. Should she keep Qin Zishi? No, Qin Zishi had his own home and family. He had to go back eventually. Xiaoqing was upset and didn't say a word. However, the little bun misunderstood. He thought that Xiaoqing was angry and didn't want him anymore. At that time, he didn't even dare to cry. He sniffed softly. His nose and eyes were red. Although there were no tears, he looked very pitiful. Xiaoqing looked down and saw the little bun sticking out his round, white, and tender but with a pitiful expression that said, "Oh my God, Mama doesn't want me anymore. What should I do? I'm scared." The little bun's nose and eyes were all red. She smiled immediately and lowered her head to kiss the little bun's nose. Then she said, "It's Mama's fault. I didn't think about your feelings. Do you like Xiaoxi a lot?" The little bun hesitated for a long time. On one hand, he was afraid that his mother would be angry, but on the other hand, he didn't want to go against his own thoughts. After all, he really liked Brother Xiaoxi. After a long time, the little bun nodded slightly. Then he pounced forward and hugged Xiaoqing's neck. "Mama, don't abandon baby. Baby will be good in the future and won't do bad things anymore. Don't give baby away to others, I won't." Xiaoqing held the little bun's pitiful face and kissed it a few times. Then she said very seriously, "Baby, Mama is wrong this time. but you're also wrong. First, don't drug others casually in the future. That's wrong, understand? Secondly, no matter what you want to do, you have to ask for other people's opinions. It's wrong to force others to do something. Just like this time, if Mom didn't find out about your little trick and really fell for it, Mom would be very sad. It's because Mom trusted you that she was deceived by you. Your brother Xiaoxi would also be very sad because what you did was a kind of betrayal to him. Then, the two of us wouldn't like you anymore. Do you understand? The little bun hurriedly nodded and sobbed. Baby knows it's wrong. I won't do it again. But Mama, I really like brother Xiaoxi. Baby wants to play with brother Xiaoxi forever. Baby wants to live with brother Xiaoxi. I don't want brother Xiaoxi to go back. Xiaoqing rubbed the little bun's cheeks and said, after we send Xiaoxi back to the capital and then come back to deal with the matters in S City, I will discuss with Pan Pan and the others to settle down in the capital. Then, when I have nothing to do, I can go visit brother Xiaoxi, okay? The little bun hurriedly nodded and wriggled in Xiaoqing's arms. He was still young, and his three views were still in a state of development. He relied completely on what he saw and heard to determine the solution when he encountered problems. However, none of the people around him were good people. Any one of them was at the level of a devil, such as Yan Qiue, Xiaoqing, and even Gu Pan Pan. They were all people who killed decisively. Therefore, the little bun's character today was independent and decisive. He was too independent and decisive, and without proper guidance, he didn't know what was right and what was wrong. Fortunately, Xiaoqing discovered this in time. Otherwise, in a few years, a little devil might have appeared out of nowhere. Moreover, the little bun's superpower was very outstanding. It was just that there were too many strong people around him, so he just needed to enjoy being protected. Xiaoqing deliberately protected him. Otherwise, the little bun would also be an outstanding superpower user. Chapter 300. His devouring ability was very effective against humans, zombies, and mutant animals. As long as they were not much stronger than him, they would be devoured. Moreover, he could only digest a part of the energy he devoured. Although he had to expel the rest, it could be used as energy for his attacks. It was scary to think of it this way. After comforting little Bun, Qin Zishi came in with a kettle and asked softly, "Where is the hot water bag?" To be honest, Xiaoqing was a little embarrassed, especially when she knew that her son wanted her to have sex with Qin Zishi. But now was not the time to be embarrassed. She had to cover up little Bun's lie, so she found a hot water bag, poured some water in it, and gave it to little Bun. Little Bun instantly understood and hurriedly hugged the hot water bag. When he looked at Qin Zishi, he still felt a little embarrassed and guilty. After Qin Zishi put down the kettle, he sat awkwardly at the side, his gaze clearly lingering on the cup on the table. Xiaoqing immediately felt even more embarrassed. Qin Zishi had clearly heard her conversation with little Bun. Although she didn't know how much he had heard, he clearly knew what little Bun had done. Otherwise, he wouldn't have appeared so awkward. The atmosphere in the entire space was very awkward. Fortunately, the group of people who went out to hunt came back. The three of them secretly breathed a sigh of relief and ended the awkward atmosphere. The main chef was still Yan Hanqing, followed by Xiaoqing, Gu Pan Pan, and the other girls. They were responsible for washing and cutting the vegetables. The men were responsible for handling the game. They caught a lot of game, including many fish. Crucian carps could be used to make soup, carps could be used to make sweet and sour soup, and small ones could be fried directly. In short, it was a very sumptuous lunch. Everyone ate happily. After lunch, Xiaoqing poked Little Bun. Little Bun was a little embarrassed. He hugged Ye and secretly followed Qin Zishi, ready to apologize. Xiao Qing was afraid that Little Bun's hard-earned companion would be gone because of his one mistake, so she urged him to apologize. Although the Little Bun really went overboard this time, Xiao Qing believed that as long as he apologized sincerely, Qin Zishi would forgive him. After that, Xiao Qing went back to her room. Once she was back, Xiao Qing was stunned because Yan Qiue was drinking water at the table. Xiao Qing wanted to curse out loud because the atmosphere was too awkward. When everyone came back, Xiao Qing heaved a sigh of relief and forgot about the Little Bun's drug, so, the water that Yan Qiue drank was drugged. When Yan Qiue saw Xiao Qing coming back, she put down the cup and licked her lips. "Where did you get the water? It's a little sweeter than ordinary well water and river water. Do you want to pack a little more so that you can drink it when you run out of water in the future?" Xiao Qing was speechless. She didn't know how to face Yan Qiue, so she directly ignored him and opened the kettle. As she expected, there was a little red flower floating in the water. The flower was already a little withered. Now that it was full of water, it stretched its petals and floated up and down. It looked quite beautiful. However, this didn't change the fact that it was an aphrodisiac flower. In other words, Yan Qiue was drugged. Xiao Qing was so annoyed that she wanted to scratch her head. After Yan Qiue was drugged, she would definitely be the antidote. Otherwise, with Yan Qiue's temper, he would never find another woman even if he wanted to die. Chapter 301. Xiao Qing was extremely annoyed. She glanced at Yan Qiue from the corner of her eye and suddenly found that his eyes were full of slyness. She suddenly thought of something. What did Yan Qiue do? He was a researcher. He had a deep understanding of mutant plants, mutant animals, paranormals, and zombies. How could he not notice that there was something wrong with the water? Even if he didn't notice it when he poured it, how could he not notice it after drinking it? He could even tell her with relish that the water was really sweet. What was that saying again? The more you want to hide, the easier it is to be exposed. This was clearly a case of trying to cover up. A clever person may be the victim of his own cleverness. After thinking it through, Xiao Qing was no longer annoyed. She clapped her hands and looked at Yan Qiue with a faint smile. Then she said, "If you like it, you can drink the whole pot." Yan Qiue was dumbfounded. The script wasn't written like this. It was different from what he imagined. In fact, when he entered the house, he felt that something was wrong, but he didn't think too much about it. After all, it was no different from being in his own house. If he still needed to be on guard in his own house, then there was no point in living. Then he sat down and poured a glass of water. When the glass was about to touch his lips, he realized that something was wrong. There was something wrong with the water. Yan Qiue's research on various mutant plants was very profound. He sniffed carefully and found that the water had an aphrodisiac smell. He went crazy at that time. In Xiao Qing's house, he found water with an aphrodisiac smell. What else was there to say? Someone must have tried to drug Xiao Qing. How could this be tolerated? This couldn't be tolerated. However, Yan Qiue's thoughts were in a whirl. He quickly considered this point. Looking at the situation, Xiao Qing shouldn't have been drugged yet. Otherwise, she would have gone crazy by now. In other words, he was the first person to touch this glass of water. Then it would be easy. He could drink the water, and then... maybe he could directly pursue Xiao Qing. To be honest, since he abandoned everything and followed Xiao Qing to the S-City survivor base, Yan Qiue began to lose confidence. There were too many competitors and threats everywhere. He thought that he was a very outstanding man, but none of the men around Xiao Qing were worse than him. And it wasn't the first time that he confessed to Xiao Qing. But And balls. He didn't get any response, no wonder he lost confidence. Imagine, a woman's eyes. He his eyes. It would be strange if he had confidence. This was an opportunity. Yan Qiue was sure that if he was really drugged, Xiaoqing would never leave him alone. As long as they had sex again, even if it was for the sake of responsibility, Xiaoqing would accept him. At that time, he could talk to Xiaoqing, and he could almost get her. This was probably his only chance, and it was very tempting. Yan Qiue held the glass of water for half an hour. He was so hesitant that his forehead was sweating. In the end, he gave up. Yan Qiue was a very proud person. This kind of pride was not only shown in his way of doing things, but was also engraved in his bones. He knew that even if he used this kind of despicable method to get together with Xiaoqing, it would still leave her with regrets and estrangement in her heart. That was what he disdained to do. Even if Xiaoqing refused to accept him in the end, he wouldn't do such a thing. However, Yan Qiue still drank a little. It wasn't much. At most, it would let him do it for a while. Then Yan Qiue sat upright and still, waiting for Xiaoqing to find out. Then he could take the opportunity to act coquettishly and take advantage of her. Maybe he could get Xiaoqing's loving touch. Ahem, to improve their relationship. Chapter 302. Yan Qiue threw a tantrum and refused to go out. Since that day, Yan Qiue had been holed up in the tent. When they were on the road, he would crawl into the back seat and turn his back to everyone. It was very awkward. Xiaoqing couldn't help but want to laugh. Then she touched her chin. It seemed that she hadn't reminded him before. After he embarrassed himself, he really lost his temper. This little temper was quite stubborn. Xiaoqing began to think about how to coax Yan Qiue, who was throwing a tantrum, back. Probably because he had done something wrong before, Little Bun was especially attentive, obedient, and well-behaved these days. During lunch, he would often hold a pile of snacks or drinks and distribute them everywhere. Qin Zishi was a bit embarrassed and angry. Later, he thought it through. Little Bun was just a child. Why was he angry with him? In addition, Little Bun sincerely apologized, so he forgave him. The two of them stuck together all day long. This time, the journey to the capital was quite long. The group often stopped and walked. When they saw good scenery, they would stop and have a picnic. They lived like immortals. It didn't seem like they were struggling in the end of the world. Instead, it was more like they were traveling. Then, after many days of traveling, the group finally arrived at the capital. The capital was as bustling as before. From afar, they could see many people going in and out of the gate. Probably because of bad luck, when the group just arrived at the gate of the capital and got out of the car, before they had time to look at the gate, a badly mutilated corpse fell under their feet. Xiaoqing's group was stunned. First, they didn't expect that there would be someone who dared to be so presumptuous at the gate of the capital. Second, they didn't expect that they would be so lucky. The corpse fell right next to Xiaoqing's feet. The blood and dust splattered, staining Xiaoqing's trousers red. Bad luck. Yan Qiue couldn't stand it anymore. He tugged at Xiaoqing, took out a tissue, and half-knelt by the side to wipe the stain on Xiaoqing's trousers. Xiaoqing didn't care about the stain. She pulled Yan Qiue and said, "What, you're not angry with me anymore?" Yan Qiue snorted. He held Xiaoqing's hand and said, "Who told you to watch me make a fool of myself? You didn't remind me, yes, I was wrong." Xiaoqing touched his head. Her eyes curved and she looked very gentle. Yan Qiue didn't have any temper. He couldn't wait to hug Xiaoqing, find a place where there was no one else, and make love to her. Dummy Air was unwilling. He came over from the other side, grabbed Xiao Qing's other hand, and glared at Yan Qiua angrily. Lin Qifan felt his entire body stiffen. He could no longer shift his gaze away. He stared fixedly at Xiao Qing, carefully sizing her up. Those familiar eyes, that familiar gentleness, everything about her, am I dreaming? While Lin Qifan was frozen, the people beside him walked over angrily. The girl pointed at the corpse on the ground and said, "How dare you stain my dress? Drag it back. Cut it up and feed it to the dogs." Xiao Qing looked up and saw several people crowding around a young girl. The young girl's eyes were filled with arrogance, and her entire body was filled with an air of arrogance. Beside her, there was an even younger girl. She was battered and exhausted, and her body was riddled with wounds. She was being held down by a man, and tears streamed down her face as she looked at the corpse on the ground, constantly struggling. But she was just a weak girl. How could she struggle against an adult man? Moreover, he was a psychic. Chapter 303. Xiao Qing did not care about this kind of thing. There were too many injustices in the world. She had to find out who was right and who was wrong. Then, she would take care of it until the end. It was too tiring. A group of thugs rushed over and dragged the corpse from the ground. At this time, Xiao Qing discovered that he was still breathing. However, his breathing was very weak. If he was hit a little harder, he would really go to hell. "Let go of my brother. If you have any problems, come at me." The girl kept struggling. The pampered girl was probably annoyed by listening to her. She turned around and slapped her. "Bitch. Shut up. Isn't it easy to die? In a while, I will make sure that you can't die even if you want to. In Jingdu, no one dares to steal my man." The girl was slapped until her head was crooked. Her face quickly swelled up. She bit her lips tightly and stared at the girl who called herself Lu Axan. Then, she looked at Lin Qifan with contempt and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Pay." On the other side, Xiao Qing also saw Lin Qifan. Her eyes were filled with disgust and murderous intent. If they weren't at the gates of the capital, she really wanted to rush up and stab this man. Hiding the anger in her eyes, Xiao Qing waved her hand. "Let's go." Gu Panpan could not bear it. However, she knew that the ones who died the fastest in the apocalypse were not the weak, but the saints. It was not that you could not be kind, but you could not be kind. Sometimes, the people you saved might backstab you. She saw this more clearly than anyone else. She remembered that at the beginning of the apocalypse, they were trapped in the city. After being trapped for a period of time, they ran out of ammunition and food. They did not have anything to eat or drink. Finally, the army came to rescue them. There were about 30 soldiers in that small group. They saved these people and gave them food. However, because the soldiers controlled the food and only gave them food every day, these bastards were instigated by others to steal their guns and food. The chaotic noises and the smell of blood attracted countless zombies. In the end, whether it was soldiers or refugees, they all died in the mouths of the zombies. Gu Chuan was smart. He covered Gu Ponpon's mouth and hid her in the storeroom. That was how they escaped. From that time onwards, Gu Panpan was very clear that without absolute strength, one should not save others. She could be kind and have her own bottom line, but she could not be careless and be kind. Otherwise, not only would she die, but her family and friends would also die. Therefore, although she could not bear it, Gu Panpan would only say it. She would not really do anything. The group of people handed the car over to the security guard for inspection and prepared to go in. Xiao Qing had just taken a few steps forward when Lin Qifan came up to her. His face was flushed from excitement, and his breathing was rapid. After stopping Xiao Qing for a long time, he said softly, "Ah Qing." Xiao Qing felt disgusted. She did not know how this man could be so shameless. When he cheated, did he consider that he already had a wife and children? When he allowed his mistress to kill her and little Bun, did he consider the relationship between husband and wife? Now that she was lucky to not die, this man came over with an expression as deep as the sea. What did he want? What should she do? She really wanted to slap Lin Qifan's head and make his brain splatter everywhere. Xiao Qing took a deep breath and chuckled, "Do you know me?" When she spoke, she had a smile on her face, but her eyes were cold. Yan Qiue's reaction was the fastest. He clung onto Xiao Qing's lower body like a boneless snake and rested his head on Xiao Qing's shoulder. His breath smelled like orchids and was exceptionally charming. "Ah Qing, do you know this man?" Chapter 304. Dai didn't fall behind. He clung onto Xiao Qing's other side and rubbed his face against Xiao Qing's cheek. Xiao Qing rubbed Yan Qiue's chin with her fingertips and said lazily, "I don't know her." Lin Qifan's expression immediately turned ugly. He couldn't even hold back his smile. At this moment, the pampered girl walked over. Her eyes were filled with jealousy. "Qifan, who are you talking to now?" Lin Qifan didn't know why, but he didn't want Xiao Qing to see him and Lu Axan being so close. He couldn't help but take a step back. Lu Axan reached out her hand and didn't manage to put it on his shoulder. Lu Axan immediately became angry. However, she wasn't angry at Lin Qifan. Instead, she was angry at Xiao Qing. She raised her chin and her eyes were filled with arrogance. Her tone was full of disdain. Where did this shameless woman come from? Seducing other people's men on the street. I've never seen a living bitch before. Come, let me see. Xin air. Lin Qifan awkwardly tugged at Lu Xan's sleeve. This made her even angrier. She gritted her teeth and said, "First it's this woman, then it's that woman. Lin Qifan. Today, I want to ask you, which one is real and which one is fake? What excuses do you have to tell me?" Lin Qifan looked at the disdain in Xiao Qing's eyes and felt extremely awkward, especially when Xiao Qing leaned against Yan Qiue. She chuckled and said, "You're right about one thing. I haven't seen a living bitch before, but I've seen one today. Let me teach you something. The man you treat like a treasure might not even be worth as much as a blade of grass in other people's eyes. No, he might not even be worth as much as a pile of shit. Especially a man like that. If you give him to me for free, I'll be disgusted." Yan Qiue liked Xiao Qing's arrogant and cute look the most. He leaned over and kissed the corner of Xiao Qing's mouth. Then, with a coquettish glance, he said lazily, "Darling, why do you have to lower yourself to their level? They're a match made in heaven." Dai also leaned over and kissed Xiao Qing's left cheek. He nodded seriously. Although he had always hated Yan Qiue, what he said today was still reasonable. This time, not only did Lin Qifan's face turn ugly, but Lu Xan's face also turned ugly. She came from a good family, and even after the apocalypse, she had never suffered. This was the first time someone had scolded her so directly. For a moment, she actually didn't come back to her senses. Her pale little face didn't know how to retaliate. After a long while, he said as if he had gone mad, "Tear this bitch's mouth for me." And the two men beside her. Qin Zishi had been watching from the side for a long time. Although he didn't understand the whole story, he could roughly figure it out. Xiao Qing was his friend. How could he allow others to bully her? At that time, Qin Zishi took a step forward, and Big Bear roared and slapped the two paranormals away. Big Bear's size was really scary. After slapping the two paranormals away, it stood behind Qin Zishi obediently, looking a little simple and honest. Qin Zishi looked at Lu Axian with a serious face and said coldly, "Say it again. What do you want?" At that moment, Lu Axian was close to a half-crazy state. She was so angry that her eyes turned red. She wanted to bite Xiao Qing to death. "I'm going to tear this bitch's mouth. And you guys." After saying that, she suddenly realized that Qin Zishi looked a little familiar. Then, she took a closer look at Qin Zishi, and her face turned even paler. Qin Zishi was famous in Jingdu because his father was awesome. The Qin family was a traditional family of generals. Before the apocalypse, they were very powerful in the Celestial Empire. At their peak, they had 3 commanders in one family. Chapter 305. It was as if they controlled an entire military region. The Qin family's descendants, whether they were in business, politics, or the military, were all famous. After the apocalypse, the Qin family joined forces with several powerful families to build a survivor base in the capital. In other words, the Qin family was one of the few powerful families in the capital. No matter how powerful Lu Axian's family was, they couldn't be compared to Qin Zishi's family. Those who had some family background had been taught early on to look at the photos of those who could not be trifled with. Although they were foppish, they should at least have some insight. She did not expect that she would kick an iron plate. Xiao Qing looked a little tired. She said softly, "Forget it. You're finally back. Let's stop here." After saying that, she turned to look at Lu Axian. "Let go of the 2 people in your hands and disappear from our sight immediately." She did not say anything threatening and her expression was very cold. However, Lu Axian did not say anything. She gritted her teeth and said, "Let him go. Retreat." She then left in a hurry with her people. Lin Qifan glanced at Xiao Qing again before he turned around and left with Lu Axian. The girl was thrown to the ground. She scrambled forward and hugged her brother. Then, she burst into tears. Her brother was still hanging on by his last breath and was about to die. Xiao Qing didn't like trouble, but she was willing to help if she could. Xiao Qing took out some medicine and gave it to the girl. She patted her shoulder and didn't say anything. The girl was very grateful and kept thanking Xiao Qing. Even though she knew that she couldn't save her brother, she was still very grateful to Xiao Qing. She and her brother came to the capital from another place. Her brother had some special abilities, but she was just an ordinary person. However, her brother protected her very well. When they first came to the capital, they had no relatives. The girl met Lin Qifan by accident. Lin Qifan looked like a decent person and was good at sweet talking. He deliberately got close to the girl and helped her a lot. Naturally, she let down her guard. Lin Qifan claimed that he did not have a girlfriend and wanted to pursue the girl. The girl was a reserved girl, so she did not agree. Who knew that today, her brother had completed a mission and returned to the city. She went to the entrance to pick him up and coincidentally met Lin Qifan. The 2 of them had just chatted for a while when Lu Axian came over. Then, Lu Axian said that she seduced Lin Qifan. The man who swore that he didn't have a girlfriend and that he liked her didn't even dare to say a word. The girl immediately understood that Lin Qifan was trying to cheat on her, but Lu Axian found out about it. However, Lu Axian was an unreasonable person. If it wasn't for Xiao Qing, she and her brother might have died at the door. Xiao Qing helped the girl carry her brother into the city. She only left after sending them to their home. After leaving, Qin Zishi said excitedly, "Why don't you come to my house? You've taken good care of me before. Now that I'm the host, I'll do my best. Xiaoqing originally wanted to refuse, because she knew that Qin Zixi family wasn't simple. However, when she saw the excitement in Qin Zixi's eyes and the pitiful look on the little bun's face, she agreed. Okay. Qin Zixi secretly made a "yeah" sign, then brought Xiaoqing to his house. The group of people walked and walked until they reached the exclusive residential area of the capital. Xiaoqing also understood why Lu Axan was afraid of Qin Zixi. It turned out that Qin Zixi was the son of an official. Chapter 306. However, she made friends with Qin Zixi, not his family, so she didn't care about it. As soon as Qin Zixi returned, Lan and the others dispersed in an instant. A middle-aged man who looked like a butler came over and said, "Young master, you're back. I'll go and inform." "You don't have to inform anyone. Dad and the others are very busy. Don't let them know. I'll bring my friends back to play. When Dad comes back tonight, I'll tell him." Qin Zixi waved his hand and said, "Uncle Wang, I've gained a lot on this trip. They're all at the door. Help me settle them down. Don't let anyone get close. Ada and the others are very fierce." The butler said helplessly, "Okay, young master." Then he went out. Qin Zixi immediately led Xiaoqing and the others inside excitedly. As he walked, he said, "I live with Dad and Grandpa now. My dad is very fierce, but Grandpa is very nice. He will definitely like the babies and Sister Qing very much." Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She just listened to his introduction with a smile. "In front of us is our garden. My grandpa likes flowers very much. He collected a lot of seeds and planted them many times. Some of them are alive, and some of them can't be planted. But the garden is still very beautiful." As soon as Qin Zixi returned home, he became much more lively. "Further ahead is our family's training ground. My dad and grandpa are both soldiers. When they have nothing to do, they like to do military boxing or exercise. They don't like to build a gym, so they built an open-air training ground. There are still a lot of equipment in it." Qin Zixi led a group of people forward. As they were walking, they suddenly saw an old man carrying a birdcage. The old man's hair and beard were white, and he was wearing a tang suit. As soon as he saw Qin Zixi, he quickly walked over. "My dear grandson, I missed you so much. Come and let me see if you've lost weight." Qin Zixi hurried forward and said honestly, "I'm back, Grandpa." The old man pinched Qin Zixi's arm and said in an exaggerated tone, "Oh, you haven't lost weight at all. You've gained so much weight." Qin Zixi's face was a little red. He had been fed by Xiaoqing and the others for the past 2 days, so he had gained more than just a little weight. He quickly changed the topic. "Grandpa, I brought my friends here to play this time. Let me introduce them to you. These are my friends." Then, he introduced Xiaoqing and the others to him, with the emphasis on his little friend, Little Bun. The little bun was a bit nervous. He raised his head to look at the old man and tried his best to make his bun face look serious. "Grandpa and I am baby." The old man lowered his head and looked at Little Bun. Little Bun immediately became even more nervous. His bun-like face puffed up. The old man didn't say anything, and neither did Little Bun. It had to be said that this old man looked quite fierce, especially his eyes. When he glared, coupled with his broad forehead, heroic face, and the scar on his face, he was definitely the kind that could stop children from crying at night. The old man and the little boy looked at each other for 2 minutes. Then, the little bun sat on the ground and began to cry. The old man's hands immediately went numb. He wanted to reach out to support the little bun, but he was afraid that the little bun would cry even harder. Qin Zishi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Grandpa, don't scare him." He helped little bun up and comforted him. Only then did little bun stop crying. However, he kept burrowing into his mother's arms. He looked quite frightened. The old man was a bit dispirited. Actually, he quite liked little bun, especially when he looked at little bun's chubby little face. He even wanted to poke it a few times. However, he had been disliked by children for a long time. When a child met him, 9 of them would be scared away. It wasn't easy for him to meet his grandson's little friend. He also liked him, but he had actually scared him to tears. The old man was a bit upset. Was he that scary? Qin Zishi was very familiar with his grandfather. He patted his forehead helplessly and said, "Don't stare at baby with an expressionless face. No matter how brave he is, he will still be frightened by you." Xiao Qing smiled and said, "Old man, perhaps you can try smiling." Then, the old man grinned. His already ferocious face became even scarier. Xiao Qing was speechless. Chapter 307. Noticing Xiao Qing and the others' expressions, the old man felt wronged and quickly put on a serious face. He felt hurt again. Then the little bun reached out his hand and touched the old man's waist. He wanted to touch the old man's hair because his mother often touched his head when he was sad. However, he was too short, so he could only touch the old man's waist even if he stood on tiptoe. The old man's expression didn't change, but there was joy in his eyes. He tried hard to suppress the corners of his mouth, afraid that he would scare the little bun away if he suddenly smiled. Then the old man secretly grabbed the little bun's tender hand, but the little bun didn't pull his hand away. His thoughts were simple. This was his friend's grandfather, so he had to show him some respect. Didn't he see how sad his friend's grandfather was just now? If his grandfather was sad, his friend would be sad too. After the little bun didn't pull his hand away, the old man was obviously in a much better mood. When he looked at Xiao Qing and the others again, his gaze became gentler. "Xiaoxi, are these your friends?" Qin Zishi nodded and introduced Xiao Qing and the others to the old man one by one. To be honest, the old man had never heard of Xiao Qing and the others' names. Although he didn't show any expression, it was obvious that he was listening very carefully and really remembered their names. Xiao Qing's impression of the old man improved instantly. It was obvious that the old man treated them so seriously only because they were his grandson's friends. Especially when Xiao Qing was introduced, when the old lady heard that the little bun was Xiao Qing's son, she said 2 words to Xiao Qing for the first time, "Very good." Then he said, "Don't stand at the door. Let's go in. Since we're all Xiaoxi's friends, there's no need to be shy." Then he led the way inside. Qin Zishi's house wasn't very luxurious. It was even a little low-key, but it was obvious that it had a strong foundation. In short, Xiao Qing liked this style of decoration very much. She couldn't help taking a few more glances at it. After the group of people sat down on the sofa in the living room, a nanny immediately came up to pour tea. When the old man sat down, he specifically let the little bun sit beside him and even instructed the nanny to bring some candy over. There was a big box of candies. There were chocolates, soft candies, and milk candies. In short, they were all things that children liked to eat. The old man looked at the little bun kindly and asked, "What do you like to eat? If you like them, I'll give them all to you." Little bun wasn't afraid at all, but he wasn't greedy either. He only took 2 pieces of chocolate and a piece of soft candy. Then, he looked at the soft candy man and wavered between Sun Wukong and Chang Yi. In the end, he gritted his teeth and took Sun Wukong. the little bun was too obedient. The old man immediately liked him even more. He pushed the box away. "If you like them, then take them all." Little Baozi shook his head and said softly, "Your brother Xiaoxi's grandfather, so Bao Bao won't treat you as an outsider. But one shouldn't be too greedy. This is enough for me." The old man nodded. It seemed like he wanted to laugh, but he forcefully suppressed the corners of his mouth. He was probably afraid that he would scare the little bun into crying again. One could see the upbringing of their parents by looking at their children. Therefore, the old man's impression of Xiao Qing became even better. He stood up reluctantly and said, "If I'm around, you won't be able to relax. Have fun. I'm going upstairs first." Little Baozi hesitated for a moment. Then he tugged at the old man's sleeve and said, "Grandpa, stay and play with us. I like Grandpa." Chapter 308. The old man was very happy. Although he did not show it, the excitement in his eyes was very obvious. It was the first time a child was so close to him. However, the old man still gritted his teeth and refused. "No, you will be afraid if I am here." The little bun said with a serious face, "Why should we be afraid? Just like the other children are afraid of my eyes. But I am not afraid of you at all, Grandpa. Or do you not like me?" The old man immediately felt distressed and said with a cold face, "Who is afraid of your eyes? Grandpa thinks your eyes are very cool. They are very beautiful. Then stay and play with me." The little bun immediately smiled and revealed 2 small canine teeth. The old man's heart immediately softened and his raised but fell back down. He muttered in his heart, Stay a little longer. You don't have to be restrained. Just treat this as your own home." After interacting for a long time, one would find that the old man was actually very kind. It was because of his face that people would think he was fierce. It could be seen from his interaction with the little bun that an old man who liked children so much could not be too hard-hearted. When a group of people sat together, they naturally chatted and drank tea. The old man's eyes were very sharp. He observed Xiao Qing for a long time and suddenly said, "You used to be soldiers." This sentence was not a question, but a statement. There was a special connection between soldiers, just like when Xiao Qing first met Yan Hanqing, she could tell that he was a soldier. "Yes, Hanqing and I were both soldiers, but I have been retired for a long time." Xiao Qing chuckled. Although after she retired, there was no arrangement for her to change her profession, which made her feel at a loss and did not know how to live in the future, she still did not regret it. She gave the best of her youth to the military. She even had a military complex that could not be untied. Even if she had been retired for a long time, even if she had struggled for a long time in the apocalypse, when she saw soldiers again, she would have a good impression of them. Most people who had been soldiers for a long time would be like this, such as her and the old man in front of her. "I can see." His gaze was gentle, as if he was reminiscing about his younger days. Kids these days can't even endure hardships. "Why did you retire from the army so early?" "I was injured during a mission, and my body couldn't keep up with the training, so I had no choice but to retire," Xiao Qing chuckled and said, "I was really young when I retired." The old man's gaze suddenly became gentler. From Xiao Qing's words, he could tell that she was not a soldier who served in the military, nor was she a soldier who could be bought with money. She was a soldier who walked on the edge of life and death. "Good, very good." The old man sighed and said, "He's a good soldier." Yan Hanqing remained silent until everyone stopped talking. Then he saluted. "Sir." The old man carefully looked at Yan Hanqing and slapped his thigh. "I know you. You're known as the Manchurian Tiger of the North China military region. Yan Hanqing did not feel anything because of the praise. He even felt that he was not qualified to say his number. But obviously, the old man remembered it very clearly. They changed from chatting casually before to talking about military life and so on. The other few people couldn't get a word in. When Qin Zixi father came back, he saw his old man with his arm around a young man's shoulder and chatting happily with another good-looking woman. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.